The Noble Queen, a Shadow Slave Fanfic. Chapter 301-325. The sickeningly sweet scent hit Noble's nostrils before she could enter the room. It was a subtle smell, but her ascended nose was keenly aware of it, and it filled her with a small feeling of dread. It was the scent of death. Noble pushed aside the debilitating emotion of fear. The saint was here to talk to them, not hurt them. Behind a wooden desk, one of the few things not made of stone in the whole citadel, sat a gaunt man in his late 50s. The government saint had a stern expression. He was used to having power and responsibility, and the three new masters barely gave him pause. "Please come in." Kor's grating voice and piercing gaze demanded obedience. Setting aside the things on his desk, Wake of Ruin folded his hands. A neutral smile came to his face. "Master Noble, Master Sarai, and Master Celio." The last name was said with a hint of irony. "Congratulations on your ascension. I was not aware that we had a seed festering above us, yet you have handled that problem quite nicely." "Thank you. I am happy we could be of service." Noble nodded as she hovered over a stone stool. "I read the report. You went straight from the Nightmare Gate into the seed. Gates have only ever been a one-way trip. How did you manage that kind of feat?" Kor's question was more than just idle curiosity. It was a test. "As I said in my interview, I had a strange memory that allowed me to break both the barriers of the gate and the seed. However, the portcullis key was destroyed in order for us to exit the nightmare." Noble answered truthfully. After weighing her response, Kor relaxed slightly. "That is good to know. While I think the memory would have gone a long way in our research of how the gates work, it is probably better this way." Noble had an inkling of what the saint meant. If others found out she was in possession of such a powerful item, then her life could get very complicated very quickly. It was an unpleasant thought. "It is not something either of us need to worry about anymore," Noble assured him. "You have enough on your mind as it is." "How is everything?" Last Noble had heard, Saint Kor was battling fiercely in Antarctica. Either there was a lull in the action, or the matter of the new gateway was important enough to garner his personal attention. "I cannot answer for everything, but I am still alive, which is more than can be said for many," Kor said at length, his eyes softening and then hardening again. "But that is not why we are here." "Why are we here?" Nickel's deep, unnatural voice asked with a hint of impatience. Always straight to the point, Kor nodded gruffly. "Just as well, I don't have much time. So I will be brief. That citadel of yours is unexpected, especially since it is on top of an already existing government installation." Wake of Ruin frowned. He didn't like surprises. "With such close proximity, it is necessary for us to work together as well as discourage the legacy clans from getting any ideas." "Ideas?" Sarai asked quietly, her curiosity overcoming her fear of the powerful saint. "The legacies are always looking to expand. They are a little occupied right now with other matters, but soon enough they may turn their eyes our direction. The government does not currently have a saint that can claim the Crestfall Citadel, but I think stationing a few dozen government awakened there should let others know we don't plan on having a legacy neighbor." Kor leaned back slightly in his chair. Nickel narrowed his gaze. "Are you asking for permission or telling us the way this is going to be?" Kor's mouth tilted upward slightly. "I am requesting permission with the understanding that it is in your best interest. The gateway is exposed and in need of protection that the three of you will not be able to provide on your own. As a gesture of goodwill, we have already begun construction on a fortification wall." "A gesture of goodwill? You act like you are getting nothing out of it." Nickel crossed his arms. Kor held up a single bony finger. "On the contrary, I make no secret that this arrangement is mutually beneficial. The government has contemplated having a base on the surface for a long time. This was the push that was needed. Very soon, Crestfall will be returned to some semblance of its former glory." The saint paused. "But if you have any objections to this offer, I will hear them now." Sarai and Noble exchanged glances, but Nickel spoke first. "As far as I am concerned, you can do whatever you like. I am sure you looked over my file before I came. I cannot stay in Crestfall. I have to find a way to get back to my usual citadel before anyone is the wiser." A silent understanding passed between Nickel and Kor. You can have any resources you need from Ender's Deep to make that happen. Wake of Ruin nodded slowly. And you ladies, will you be leaving also? A memory appeared in Noble's hand, half of which was quickly passed to Sarai. After a silent conversation, each nodded their agreement. We do not plan to leave at this time, Noble spoke for both of them. And we would welcome the government reinforcements on a few conditions. Saint Cor raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. We would like a preliminary list of those who want to tether to the gateway. It will be good to know who exactly to expect. For now, we would like those individuals to continue to reside in Ender's Deep, at least until more buildings can be built around the palace. The living quarters we choose are off limits to anyone, even if others move into the palace. And, Noble added with a small smile, Awakened Venster gets the first choice of overseeing the transition, should he want the job. The ladies felt all of the requests were reasonable. Noble was particularly interested in keeping her private space away from others. Though it had never happened to her in Ender's Deep, Noble's living in the government citadel meant that her lodgings could be entered by any high-ranking government official if they had just cause. I would rather work with you than against you. Cord tapped his fingers together. These conditions are acceptable. A list of awakened workers will be provided to you soon. Thank you for your cooperation. The three masters stood. Nick feigned indifference at what had transpired, but Noble could sense his profound relief. Although he didn't need it, he had been given permission and even offered help to go back to whatever citadel he called home. Where exactly is he normally? Noble wondered. Sarai dipped her head in a modified bow, very happy to have things sorted without a fight. As for Noble, she wasn't sure how to feel. She had gotten what she wanted from the exchange, protection as well as privacy. She should be happy. The professor turned to leave, wrestling with the decision that was warring in her mind when the choice was made for her. Cor cleared his throat. Ascended Noble, I would like another word with you before you leave. Sarai paused in the doorway, a question passing to Noble through the other's voice. Do you need me to stay? Shaking her head, the professor reassured her friend. I'm sure it is fine. The younger woman backed into the hall. Let me know if I need backup. Noble smiled softly. I will. Not that either Noble of Sarai could do much against the powerful saint. But the professor appreciated the sentiment. Once the door shut, the new master and venerated saint were left alone. A strange magical torch lit the room with an eerie light, reflecting off Cor's raven-colored hair. The glossy color reminded Noble of the feathers of the Lord of the Mountain. Saint Cor's transformation ability was becoming a murder of crows. Was it just a coincidence, or was there a connection? I read the whole report of your interview, Wake of Ruin interrupted her thoughts. Noble's eyes opened slightly. Do you do that for every new master? No, but this one held particular interest for me. Both the subject matter and the location of the nightmare. The saint tilted his head meaningfully. Oh. The professor suddenly realized what he meant. Please do not think that anything I said about Ender reflects on you personally. I would never insinuate. Please relax, child of promise. I am capable of separating myself from the person whose place I took. Cor chuckled before turning serious. I have come to terms with who he was. You two are very different. That is why it took me so long to connect the dots, Noble told him honestly. The saint's face softened for a moment. That is generous of you to say. Especially since you believe he went on to be some evil mastermind of a sorcerer. I know he did. It didn't come up in the interview, but a seer told me of the villainy of the one who had the portcullis key long ago. Noble paused as Cor's eyes lit with recognition. You are talking about a black ball. The professor nodded. Yes, you saw it. Ender had it when I entered the nightmare, but it wasn't a memory. Cor recalled the nightmare with a far-off look. Did you use it to start the protective barrier? Noble remembered that the bloom of doubt was not defeated in his nightmare. The saint had managed to contain its influence instead. I did not. The method I used, well, I was younger then. Cor's stern expression warded Noble from asking any more about that part of his experience. So she turned to the thing she wanted to know most instead. Was Lady Brenna in your nightmare? From what I gathered, the woman that Ender loved died in a feud with the kingdom's queen. Then Amira died in a battle with the tyrant, which is what drove the people below ground. Based on the information you gave, I would not be surprised if Ender orchestrated both of their deaths. Kor's mood turned melancholic. Don't blame yourself. It wasn't you who did it, Noble blurted. Blame is a funny thing. One can be innocent yet still feel the guilt. Barking a laugh, the saint shook his head. Forgive me. The death of 2 people long ago should hardly affect me when there are so many dying even as we speak. It was good that you survived, ascended Noble. Humanity needs more people who can beat the odds. Is that what you wanted to talk about? Beating the odds. Noble tilted her head. The saint tapped his fingers together. In a manner of speaking. You asked how things are going. The situation in Antarctica grows more complicated all the time. I can't imagine that clans on the brink of war with each other and nightmare gates make for a very peaceful landscape. Kor managed to keep a neutral expression, but Noble could feel his surprise. You seem to be well informed. I am going to assume that the first bit of information came from Master Celio and not your husband. Indeed, Nickel had mentioned that a war was coming between the clans. It was easy to guess that conflict would bleed over into the Antarctic campaign as soon as the great clans committed to send aid. My source was not my husband. It was my own experience and observations. Noble answered without hesitation. Then your experience will also tell you that we are short on reliable help. Aside from a handful of remarkable people, the government is in dire straits. Kor watched her face carefully. Having served diligently at the academy and with the relocation efforts, Noble knew very well how short-handed the government was. She could only guess with so many soldiers dying in Antarctica that more holes in leadership were being formed. This isn't a recruitment speech to go south, is it? The professor raised one eyebrow. It could be. Wake of Ruin's harsh aura silenced any sarcastic remark Noble might have made about him not being a very good salesman. He continued. Of course the army could use more soldiers. But I know that is not your desire, nor mine for you if I am being frank. You have proven that Antarctica is not the only place in need of protection. So if anything, I would ask that you ensure your talents are used to the best of your ability. And, should the army be in need of your particular skills in the future, I trust that you will once again answer the call as you did at the gate. So yes, this is a recruitment speech in a manner of speaking, just not for the campaign you expected. You don't have to recruit me for a team of which I am already a part. My goal is the same as any good awakened, to help humanity. Noble unconsciously touched her hand to her heart. It's the right thing to do. Kor grunted softly. You remind me of another master. She's always putting others first as well. Sir. Noble could see the man's thoughts drifting. Wake of Ruin stood, the scent of death suddenly stronger by the action. That will be all, child of promise. Kor paused, a small smile gracing his stern mouth. It is quite a true name. I do hope you live up to it. I have certainly lived up to mine. Perhaps Ender and I have more in common than I would like to admit. Noble looked at him. Kor had been among the first generation of awakened. To survive and become a saint while not being attached to a legacy clan was a nearly impossible feat. Did he somehow feel responsible for the calamities of the spell, or had he created some of his own while fighting against it? How much had he destroyed to get where he was today? Wake of Ruin, a thought came into Noble's head. The thing in the deep that was in both of our nightmares. You want to know what actually happened to it? Kor filled in her thoughts. You want to know if I or someone else destroyed it? The professor nodded. Kor pressed his lips together. I could tell you, but if you are anything like I suspect, my word will not suffice. So, enjoy your excursion into the deep, child of promise. And if you find anything, you know what to do. As Noble exited the office, Kor's gruff voice carried from behind the desk. Master Yash. In the stone hall, a man with a clean-cut beard and bald head reacted to the call. He looked at Noble, and a smile came to his lips. Ascended Noble. Master Yash. Noble repeated the name she had just heard. Very perceptive. The man's smile grew. That was quite a feat you pulled off, conquering a nightmare and making a gateway. People will certainly praise you and the others for your efforts. But I have found that it means more coming from a peer who has been through the same ordeal. So, from the bottom of my heart, I want to say, well done." The older gentleman placed his hand on his heart as a sign of solidarity. "Thank you, Master Yash. That means more than I can say." Noble was touched by the man's kindness. "Master Yash." Wake of Ruin's voice grew impatient. Yash dipped his head before slipping into the office. The door shut behind him. His emotions were also calm. It's rare to meet anyone so placid. Noble's thoughts about the serene master flew out of her mind as soon as she locked onto Sarai's emotions. "I'll be right there." Noble quickened her pace. The beautiful baker was waiting for her companion on the pathway along the edge of the citadel. She was pacing, alternately looking down into the abyss and then at the passage toward the saint's office. Hearing the words of her friend through the memory, Sarai's shoulders relaxed. The redhead ran forward and embraced Noble as she exited the tunnel. "I was worried. You were too sweet. There was no need to be concerned, everything is fine." Noble felt her friend's care warming her heart. What did Saint Cor want? Sarai's eyes opened wide. Did he change his mind about our demands? No, nothing like that. He gave me a version of the recruitment speech. Noble tugged her friend's hand. Don't worry, I'm not about to go gallivanting back into battle. I think he also wanted closure, the professor added through the other's voice. We lived two parts of the same nightmare, after all. I see. That makes sense, Sarai responded. Where's Nickel? Noble instinctively searched for the third member of their cohort. He wasn't close by. He left with Venster to get some supplies. I think he plans to leave sooner than later. Sarai was sad to have the cohort break up so soon. The group had formed to accomplish a goal, and now that it was done, it was time to part ways. That was the way things worked. We can always find him in the waking world. I know one of the places he works, Noble teased to bring Sarai from her sad thoughts. That's true, the redhead felt some relief. But it was short-lived. Her face tensed as she realized Noble was leading her toward the edge. Are we going somewhere? Maybe. The small amount of mischief in Noble's voice gave Sarai pause. She pulled her hand back. Noble. The professor chuckled lightly. Fine, fine. I'll give you the choice. Do you want to go up or down? Pursing her lips, Sarai narrowed her gaze. I need more information than that. With a small sigh, Noble stopped short of the edge. It's simple. I can either float you back to the surface in our gateway or I can take you into the abyss. Wake of Ruin insinuated that there might be something down there worth seeing. Like that flower you talked about. Sarai peered over the edge warily. Was it her imagination or was there a strange sense of foreboding emanating from below? I doubt it, otherwise I think Wake of Ruin would have warned me. Noble had felt no ill will from the saint. He had only vaguely asked her to take care of anything she found. If Kor had wanted to see her dead, there were more efficient ways than hoping she gave into her curiosity. If you are going down there, I am too. Sarai decided. I don't want you to face the deep alone a second time. Noble smiled at her friend. This is a fact-finding mission. Let's hope there is nothing to face down there at all. Just the same, I would feel better if we communicated by memory. I see no reason to attract the attention of anyone with ears. The redhead tapped the ornate piece of metal tucked behind her ear. Fair enough, Noble switched silently. Are you ready? Both ladies looked around. A few awakened were going about their daily tasks, but none of them were paying either of them any attention. Still, let's climb down to the lowest level and go from there. Noble didn't want to start rumors. Two awakened suddenly falling into the depths would be likely to raise more than a few questions. Agreed. Sarai stepped back from the edge. The leveled system of Ender's system was varied but not complex. Instead of flights of stairs, runged ladders led awakened up and down. Taking them made the trek less conspicuous, but also slower. At least Noble was able to float down them without any problems. Almost to the base. No one lived at the bottom of Ender's Deep where the caverns met the solid onyx stone. The original people must have found it too warm and cramped, and the awakened in the citadel were of the same mind. Only a few caves used for storage were this low, so the two women were able to slip over the edge unnoticed. I prefer flying to falling. Sarai swallowed, trying not to give in to her fear. The air whizzed past her at a frightening speed. A small bit of calm pressed on her consciousness along with Noble's words. Falling is much easier than flying for most people. You have control over how you descend, but I can slow you down if you want. Both ladies slowed to a less drastic pace. It was safer since it allowed Noble to sweep the darkness below for any sign of life. When no immediate danger leapt out from the walls of the wide chasm, Noble settled in for the long trek down. What do you think we will find at the bottom? Sarai asked to distract herself from the wind. The redhead could no longer penetrate the growing darkness with her eyes, and she wasn't willing to create a light. So there wasn't much left for her to do but think about falling. There may be nothing to see at all. I suppose that would be the best outcome. Noble wasn't sure what to hope for. Finding nothing would be anticlimactic, but also a relief. If there was still something in the depths, what exactly would Noble and Sarai need to do to take care of it? Noble's heart raced with anticipation of the unknown. She scanned as low as her special vision would let her, but still the world was quiet. So far, so good. The air was growing warmer, but Noble wasn't too concerned. Her ascended body was not nearly as affected as her awakened one. Still, she called forth her fire charm and tucked it into her armor just to be safe. Soon, a familiar noxious scent entered her nostrils. What is that? Sarai smelled the unpleasant change at the same moment. I think it is gases from the mountains. This is much better than it was before though, even taking into account that I am stronger. I wonder if the bloom was causing part of the stench. Noble remembered the people she had saved from the depths. Even they would not struggle to breathe right now. Noble slowed their fall as they reached the final depths. The original base of the crevice was still present, meaning that no one had set off an eruption like she had. Not that Noble had meant to do that. It was just a natural side effect of the poison that Ender had made. Searching fervently, Noble stopped, hovering both herself and Sarai just above the surface. We're here, the professor pressed her lips together nervously. Well, what do you see? Having overcome her fear of being attacked, Sarai was anxious to know what lay at the bottom of the chasm. Noble hesitated. As Saint Cor said to me, I think you'll want to see for yourself. Calling forth the aching ember, Sarai lit the spearhead with a brilliant red flame. The world that had lived only in darkness for thousands of years was suddenly revealed. Noble immediately summoned her sword. Bones. Bones as far as the eye could see. They stretched out in every direction, more numerous than either of them could count. Vertebrae. Sarai leaned down and studied them. Though different sizes, the bones indeed connected like thousands of backbones. They snaked through and over one another, often ending abruptly before tapering to a point. These were the vines that Noble had fought. This is the bloom of doubt. Sarai furrowed her brow. I thought you said it was like a plant. It was. But it was also a nightmare creature. For all we know, it used bones from its victims to form those ghastly tentacles. Noble shivered. Either way, it is dead now. The question is, what killed it? In her experience, powerful beings like the bloom of doubt didn't die of old age. Had it starved to death once all the people above had been consumed? No. The murals on the walls of Ender's Deep suggested the people had lived in the underground city for a very long time. More than that, there were signs that a great struggle had taken place, and the bloom was the loser of the confrontation. Many of the bones below the missing ends of limbs were deeply gouged. The onyx stone of the walls was also deeply scarred by the harrowing battle. Below the serpentine bones, large stones from the surface lay cracked and broken, some looking more like sand than stone. Remnants of the fallen city. The pair continued, floating above the ruins and using fire's spear to light the way. Nothing stirred in the darkness as they explored the ruins and bones. It was eerily quiet. Too quiet. The sense of foreboding was stronger down here. At first Noble thought it was her own nervousness or even Sarai's fear of falling that had stirred up the feeling of dread. But now that everything was calm, the uneasiness remained. Perhaps it was the random human tools and weapons scattered among the remains. Broken swords and axes made of the onyx stone littered the ground. The former wouldn't have done much against the terror, and the latter were clearly constructed after the creature was dead in order to strip its flesh. Were the cliff dwellers so desperate for meat that they chanced eating the corrupted flesh? That would have been a tough meal to swallow. Noble pointed to a spot where an axe was still stuck in the bone. Sarai nodded. How long do you have to cook meat like that to make it edible for mundane humans? A long time, if it is possible at all. Noble hadn't eaten many high-rank nightmare creatures. She preferred not to eat them at all. Not that there was much choice with long-term living in the dream realm. If they were unable to return to the waking world, awakened were forced to eat anything they could find. Trying not to starve was often just as serious of a problem in the dream realm as fighting off creatures when it came to moving cross-country. Was the same true for traveling through a chasm? As they hovered across the broken ground, Noble could swear her worry was steadily growing. While the professor could push the sense aside, she was still keenly aware of its existence. That could only mean one thing. I think we are under a mind attack. Noble said calmly. Oh good, you feel it too. I thought maybe I was having a panic attack. Sarai's shoulders relaxed slightly. A panic attack is worse than a mind attack. Noble resisted the urge to chuckle. The redhead nodded. At least with a mind attack, I can kill it at its source. Anyway, this one doesn't seem very strong. Any idea what is causing it? I think it's up ahead. After floating along over a kilometer, Noble felt a change in the landscape. They were reaching the end of the remains of the Bloom of Doubt and coming upon something else entirely. Be on your guard. There is something ahead. Sensing the strangeness, Noble switched to her second sight and raised her blade. What in two worlds? Coming up were dozens of little glowing dots in her vision. As they finally left behind the bones, strange splotches covered the ground like burst grapes. The stench became stronger. Sarai wrinkled her nose. What is that? I'm not sure. Noble did not sense any life in the spots. I think they are bloodstains. I'm more worried about what's ahead. What is? Oh. At that moment, Sarai's light shone on the alien orbs. Littering the tenebrous bottom of the cavern, little ovular capsules dotted the landscape. They pulsed imperceptibly, warning the women not to come any closer. They were the source of the inexplicable fear. Noble recognized them immediately. Her face grew pale. Stabbing one of the anomalies confirmed her fear. You have slain a dormant beast, seed of doubt. Seeds. Noble had seen the Bloom of Doubt try to release something from its pistil, but she had cut the flower down before it had a chance. In the real timeline, the bloom must have been able to release its spawn. The stains closer to the bones were likely other slain seeds. If Kor had come down here, perhaps he had cut them down himself. Had he missed the others or had they sprouted since then? As the seed slowly deflated, a mist came out of it. No, it was tiny spores. It was no wonder there were so many pods. Killing one meant releasing the potential for many more. Who knew how many times Kor had come down and thought he wiped out all of the seeds only for more to spring up? It was a serious problem. Sarai! Noble yelled aloud. But the redhead was already on the case. The fiery spear whizzed through the air and consumed the powdery mist, burning it to ash. The two women methodically moved along the dark chasm, destroying each of the seeds they found and burning the spores before they could spread. It was time-consuming. Another day, they would have to go in the other direction, but for now, they would have to be content with clearing a single side. I don't sense any more of them. Noble smiled when the last one was destroyed. The feeling of fear pressing upon her consciousness was gone. There had been far more than just the first ones Noble sensed. The bloom had been thorough in trying to preserve itself. Had it been on the surface, the whole dream realm would have been covered in a viney forest by now. Fortunately, the dark crevice had contained the creatures. It also contained something else. Noble's eyes opened wide. Arranged together in a small alcove were a different kind of bones. Human bones. The skeletons were laid one beside the other underneath the overhang, like a long-lost mausoleum. Was this a settlement? Sarai pointed to the remnants of a fire and possibly some cooking utensils. Noble thought for a moment. There was no way mundane humans could have survived the fall from the surface. That meant that whoever came down here would have done so intentionally. But why? Carved in runes beside the tomb, they found their answer. With great effort, Noble discerned the meanings from the shallow markings. We who lie here witnessed the true nature of Ender in the battle of the deep. To keep his secret, we were left to die. Yet we stubbornly held on, hoping we would find a way to escape. Our hope was in vain. With no more water, we have perished one by one. I am the last witness to Ender's treachery. May the gods seek vengeance. May our suffering be known. Theo. Noble stared at the runes for a long time. The words were not hard to fathom, yet they took the professor by surprise. Is this what Core wanted her to find? Or had he never ventured this far along the chasm? After reading the message once more, Noble shifted her gaze to the figure beneath it. Despite the heat, the world below the surface had been eerily preserved. The flesh may have rotted away, but the bones and armor of those who had fallen were pristine. Sitting directly below the fateful markings were the bones of a warrior. Unlike the others, who had been laid to rest, he sat staring death in the face in the end. He died holding his sword. The general's emblem on the breastplate left no doubt about who this warrior was. Theo. Noble's heart sank. She thought of the humble but capable man she had seen just the day before. Noble had left him in charge at the end of the nightmare. Theo had been healthy, full of life, and ready to serve. The world had been broken in two, but most of the people's lives had been preserved. With the stalwart general to lead them, Noble had some hope that those people might turn out all right. The truth, sadly, was not anything like what the two former queens had left behind. It was impossible to guess how much time had passed between the breaking of the earth and the battle of the deep. Theo could have lived many years before his tragic end. He could have married and had children even. He could have been quite happy for a time. Or he could have come down much sooner without a soul to miss him in the settlement above. Both options left Noble with heartache. And that was not even considering that the men down here had tried to escape their fate. Noble scanned the lines again, her eyes stopping on one particular point. They ran out of water. In the spring and summer when it rained, one of the streams that fed into the River of Tears would shower its excess into the chasm in a glorious waterfall east of the city. It was coming up on winter soon, and any sign of water was long gone. Noble doubted the snow made it down this far, but even if it did, would it have been enough to sustain the men? Probably not. Of all the ways to go, a slow death by starvation and dehydration was one of the worst. Why does it seem there are no happy endings in the dream realm? The good die in despair while the evil thrive and live a long life. Theo deserved better than this. Noble felt Sarai's hand on her shoulder. I'm sorry, the redhead wasn't sure what else to say. What else was there to say? Nothing. There was only one thing to be done. Carefully, Noble took the sword from Theo's grasp, careful not to harm the man's fragile bones. What are you doing? Sarai furrowed her brow. I am honoring his dying wish, at least the last part of it. I am placing this by the palace's gate for anyone who passes it to see. His suffering will be known. Noble nodded slowly to the remains of the dead general. Your nightmare is over. It felt strange saying it to a resident of the dream realm, especially one she had never technically met. Yet, down here alone would have been a true horror. The words were still true. Wanting to be alone with her own thoughts, Noble dismissed the other's voice. With a nod from the baker, the return trip began. The trek to the surface was spent in solemn silence. In the light of Sarai's spear, the ladies could see holes bored into the rock along with hooks and even the occasional tattered rope. Noble recognized the signs of the system of pulleys and ladders that had lowered the men to the bottom far from the Bloom of Doubt's reach. While either time or Ender had destroyed most of it, pieces of the track still remained a testament to human ingenuity. After reaching the surface, Sarai decided to walk back to Crestfall while Noble floated beside her. Thankfully the arid ground was easy to traverse, and the pair was back before the afternoon was through. Entering the palace, Noble took Theo's sword and leaned it against the ethereal gateway. She would have to construct a proper way to display it later, but there was something about the way it rested against her way home that brought her comfort. Ender had done a lot of things, but at least this one had not remained hidden forever. Noble sighed. I better be going, she told Sarai. It will be time for dinner soon and I don't want to worry the kids or Fort. The baker nodded. I should get home to my loved ones, and return the table. I'll probably have to do that first. We'll talk soon. Noble hugged her friend. It was time to return to the waking world. Passing through the starry void, Noble soon found herself in the comfort of her dojo. She took in a deep breath of filtered air. It wasn't the crisp atmosphere of the dream realm, but it was familiar and for that, she was grateful. It's nice to be home. Dismissing her secondary armor, Noble put on comfortable clothes. There was something soothing about having real clothes in the real world. She felt connected to humanity again. She felt connected to her real self. Gathering the rest of her things, Noble hastily picked up her communicator. A few messages were waiting for her, but the one that interested her most was a communication from Teddy. Fort's personal assistant had come through and sent her the report she requested. The accident report of Lance's death. Here you go, Master Noble. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Noble winced at the message, but not for the pun. It occurred to her that when talking to Saint Cor, he had mentioned her fighting at the Nightmare Gate. That meant he also knew she was Queen Bee. How many others had the clearance to read her interview and connect the dots? She would have to ask Fort this evening. But before that, Noble hesitated, her finger hovering over the attachment icon on her screen. Part of her wanted to dive in and absorb every little bit of information. That would take hours though, and she didn't have that time just now. There would be the opportunity to look more later. Perhaps just a cursory glance would satiate her burning curiosity. But the other part of her was conscience sounding alarm bells in her head. She had enough on her plate without adding to her emotional pile. It would be better to clear some of the other problems in her life before resurrecting an almost 20-year-old wound. What was wrong with her, inviting trouble like this? She almost wished her mother had never divulged her suspicions at all. That would have been simpler. But now that the box was open, there was no putting back the sneaking suspicion of foul play. Taking a deep breath, the professor came to a decision. Before she could talk herself out of looking at the document, she pressed down. The tale of her father's death came up in full display. She wasn't prepared for what she saw. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Redacted. An entire part of the document was completely blacked out and from the flow of the text, another section was removed entirely. How high of a clearance does one need to see this? Noble pursed her lips. Since Teddy had put in the request, it should have been given to her like Director Fort was going to read it. Unless he had a way of bypassing the redacted sections on his own. Noble sighed. Maybe it is better this way. She had confirmed that something was being covered up, but without any concrete knowledge, there was no way to go forward. It appeared to be a dead end. Reading over the words that were there, Noble understood why Lena thought the circumstances were suspicious. Director Lance had gone to a restaurant in the middle of the afternoon. That by itself wasn't exactly odd, except Noble's father had a strict work ethic. Eating at off times, especially leaving the office to do so, would have been rare for him. The restaurant is so far from his office. It is practically in the outskirts. Not exactly the kind of establishment Dad would have gone to without a reason. Noble read on. Lance went alone on this excursion and when he arrived, there was apparently no one inside the humble establishment. So when the building collapsed on Lance's head, the former director was the only casualty. Later, a report came out that the building had been condemned the day before for faulty workmanship. Therefore, the investigation concluded that Lance was an unfortunate victim of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. How convenient. Teenage Noble had been so wrapped up in her preparations for her first trip into the dream realm that she hadn't asked as much as she wanted to about what had happened to her father. Everyone had called it a terrible accident, and since Noble could feel their grief, she had taken the words at face value. Looking at the report objectively right now, something didn't add up. What was redacted? And what was removed? The footnotes gave a little clarity. Parts of the report related to an ongoing investigation have been removed to prevent contamination of evidence. If Lena was right and Lance had come to confront a great clan about a concern, then the statement could have been referring to that. However, the secondary case would have been long over by now. Did things retire from being redacted by the government? It seemed not. Noble held her head. As she had no idea how the other investigation was labeled, there was no good way to look it up without attracting attention. 2 years prior, the professor's android, B2 had overloaded the government system with one of Noble's requests. It had caused massive panic and almost led to Noble's arrest. Tripping another alert would certainly bring the new master under unwanted scrutiny. For her sake and the sake of her family, it was better to stay out of trouble. The only other pieces of information were some notated pictures from the scene. Noble braced herself as she looked at the images. The building had collapsed in its entirety. That was why it had taken the police some time to locate and uncover her father's body. If they had found him sooner, would he have survived? Probably not. Noble tried to comfort herself. There was no use thinking about what could have been. That would only lead her to more heartache and anger. She had already had enough of that today. So instead she looked at the pictures like a puzzle to be solved. Unfortunately, there wasn't much to see. Rubble, rubble and more rubble. Noble clicked her tongue softly. And is it my imagination or is all of the rock shiny? It wasn't her imagination. All of the stones had a luminescent quality. A notation under a close-up of a broken rock stated that the stone was weak and the glittery pinkish strands running through it were strangely porous. The investigator recommended a follow-up inquiry into why the stone was used to construct the building in the first place. I wonder if that happened. The door to the dojo suddenly opened. Oh good. You are back. I thought maybe you had gotten lost in the dream realm again. Fort's voice was playful, but the real worry behind his words was not lost on Noble. I'm sorry. I should have let you know that I was home. The professor dropped the communicator to her side and lowered her eyes. What matters is that you are here and safe. Fort furrowed his brow. Are you all right? My entrance seemed to have startled you, and I didn't know that was even possible anymore. His eyes traced down her arm to the communicator pressed up against her skirt. Are you getting caught up on the waking world? I can tell you most of the news isn't good. What little I have read would agree with your assessment. Noble shook her head. But I was engrossed in another matter. The one from earlier. The blonde man took a step into the room and shut the door. The one having to do with your strange hypothetical questions. B. Noble held up her hands in surrender. I know. I should have left the matter alone, but now I think I can, at least for now. I will not take any actions or look into anything else without consulting you first. You promise? Fort stared deeply into her eyes. Noble moved forward and entwined her fingers with her husband's. I promise. The blonde man visibly relaxed before pulling his wife into a hug. He rested his cheek against her head and changed the subject. How was the new citadel? It was unbelievable. Noble had no other word. The palace has reconstructed itself, with some minor changes. The gateway is inside. Really. The spell really did roll out the red carpet for you, as it should. Fort smiled. I don't know about that. But I do wish you could see it. It is pretty impressive, though a bit empty. Noble thought of the great hall and its lack of furniture. I'm sure you will get it furnished soon enough. I understand Sarai's new ability might be able to help on that front. If not, surely Nickel can borrow some without anyone knowing he was there. Fort winked. I see you've been doing some research of your own. Did you study up on them for your job or your own curiosity? Noble chuckled. Both, if I'm being honest. The director shrugged. How about the other part of your trip? Did the meeting with the government go well? As well as can be expected when I really had no choice but to cooperate. Noble's voice held no judgment. I was surprised to see Saint Cor handle the matter personally with all that is going on. Indeed. Fort's emotional spike caught Noble's attention. What's this? How much do you know about what the government saint is up to? You have asked a lot of questions. Perhaps it is my turn for an interrogation. Noble tilted her head up and froze. Her husband's face was so close to hers that she suddenly lost her ability to tease. A blush crept on her face. An interrogation. A smile split Fort's face. Before the director could comment further on his wife's choice of words inside the dark room, Noble pressed her lips against his. Her mind flooded with pleasant thoughts, pushing everything else aside. Unfortunately, a moment later, Noble pulled away from the warm embrace. Fort frowned, his heart racing. What is it? Did I do something wrong? Because I will do anything. Noble pressed her finger gently to his lips with a sad smile. She glanced toward the door. The kids are back. Noble decided that sensing things beyond her immediate vicinity was both good and bad. The professor felt her twins and mother come up the walkway, which meant that she could disengage from her husband and greet them without any awkward questions about what they were doing in the dojo. But ignorance of their presence would have let her have at least a few more moments of bliss. Noble looked longingly at her husband. The price would have been worth it. What price? Fort furrowed his brow. Noble bit her lip. It's not important. We can talk about it later. How much later? Fort lifted one eyebrow. I think you know the answer to that. Noble tilted up one side of her mouth. Tugging her husband's hand, the floating master reluctantly exited the dojo in time to see the three individuals burst in the front door. Dad. Mom. Look. Brock held out his foot. Grandma got us new shoes. Blaze proudly stood to be examined as well. Very stylish. Noble smiled at her sons before sending a questioning look to Lena. A grandma should be able to spoil her grandchildren once in a while. I want them to remember me when I'm old and decrepit. Lena winked. You'll never be old, Blaze protested. Old is like 90, and most people don't get there anyway. Lena's eyes crinkled. I don't know whether to be flattered that you don't think I'm old or concerned that you think I never will be. Both, Noble and Fort said in unison. They exchanged glances before smiling shyly and looking away. The grandmother nodded approvingly. Glad to see you both are getting back in sync. Did you have a little time to yourselves this afternoon? Too little, Noble lamented. I just got back from the dream realm not long ago. I see. Well, now that your business is taken care of, hopefully, you can have an enjoyable evening. Lena looked at Fort meaningfully. I plan to, the father nodded. Why do I feel like there is some conspiracy against me? Noble pouted. Conspiracy. Maybe. Against you. Never. Fort wrapped his arm around his wife's waist and kissed her cheek. The boys were so happy to see their parents together that they didn't even comment on the romantic display. They removed their new shoes and threw them on the rack by the door. After thanking and hugging their grandma, the twins raced to the living room to play some well-earned video games. Lena cleared her throat lightly. Well, I have done my duty as grandma to sugar up the kids before dinner and then leave before they crash. Have a wonderful evening. Thanks again for everything, Mom. Fort opened his arms to bring Lena into a group hug. We are going to miss you. Pish posh, Lena kissed both Noble and Fort on their cheeks. You will miss me like a toothache. But my feelings aren't hurt. Oh no, I am looking forward to the soft covers of my bed. Blaze may not think I'm old, but my bones beg to differ. We love you. Noble felt her eyes get misty. Me too, baby. More than words. Lena wiped her cheek and straightened her back. Well then, I'll be going. But before I forget, here is what you asked for. The older woman passed a bag over to Fort and then headed for the door with a small wave. Noble watched her go with the small pain in her heart that happened with every parting. You'll see her again soon, Fort promised as his arms wrapped around Noble's waist from behind. I know, she smiled sadly, it is just still hard to see her go. I would offer to distract you. Fort's whisper tickled her ear. Noble noticed the bag he had been given was gone, but she was too thrilled by his husky voice to care. What exactly are you offering? All in due time, my love, Fort answered with a twinkle in his eye. All will reveal itself in due time. Noble turned her head and her eyes fell on his lips, but just as she leaned into his chest, Fort pulled away with a teasing grin. Trying to coax the information out of me. I must admit your interrogation methods have improved. Noble flushed. I wasn't trying to interrogate anyone. I was just. Thankfully, the woman did not have to finish her sentence as the front door opened to admit another occupant. A pale girl with dark eyes and hair and a large backpack entered with a wistful expression. The teen's face changed suddenly as she nearly ran into her parents in the entryway. Mom, Dad, what are you doing here? Were you spying on me? Rain's emotions sent Noble for a loop. The girl was happy, relieved, surprised, shocked, embarrassed, frustrated and annoyed. How all of those feelings could exist in one tiny body was beyond Noble's comprehension. Spying on you? Of course not. Rain's mother quickly defended herself. Why was there something worth spying on? Her father eyed his daughter carefully. Rain's cheeks tinged red with indignation. Of course not. Noble stepped in before Fort could ask any more questions. Your grandmother just left to go back to her house. We only finished saying goodbye a moment ago. Looking down at her feet, the girl's face softened. Oh, I see. That explains the PTV I saw leave. I thought maybe Mom had. Never mind. I am sorry I wasn't here to tell Grandma goodbye. You thought Mom had what? Fort asked before Noble placed her hand on his arm. If you want to call your grandmother, I am sure she would love to hear from you. Okay, thanks, Mom. I might do that later. Rain nodded slowly. Since Grandma bought the boys new shoes, would you like to do a little virtual shopping with me? I can get you some new clothes or sneakers. If we order now, they will arrive right after your tests are done. Noble offered. But Rain shook her head. Maybe another time. I'll be in my room until dinner. More studying to do, you know. As you pointed out, midterms start tomorrow. Oh, okay. The professor put on a brave face. Shouldering her backpack, Rain passed by her parents and headed toward the hallway. She was about to turn toward her room when her mother called her name. Rainy. Noble hesitated. I know you've got a lot going on, but I need to know, are we okay? The dark-haired girl forced a smile and nodded quickly. Yes, Mom, of course. I'm fine. We are fine. I'm just busy. I'll see you at dinner. Bye. The teen hurried away and closed her door. Ford looked at his wife and stroked his chin. I'm not an expert on teenage behavior, but that bit about her being fine. That was a lie, wasn't it? Noble's expression turned grim. Yep, it was a big fat lie. But that means. Fort blinked. His wife pressed her lips together. That's right. I've broken our little girl's heart. There was only one thing to do. In many ways, it was harder than slaying a nightmare creature. And far messier. Rain shut her eyes for a moment, listening deeply to the music playing in her headphones. The soundtrack to The Devil of Antarctica was almost as good as Song of Light and Darkness. She could easily get lost in the crescendos and hide her sorrow in the subtle harmonies. Griffin's music was simply second to none. The knock on the door was only faintly heard through the rising and falling of the melody. Rain set down her study material and slipped the headset to her shoulders as she hit pause. Who is it? The door slid open, and Noble peeked her head in apologetically. May I come in? The teenager thought about reminding her mother that she needed to study for midterms, but the pleading blue eyes of the older woman melted her resolve. Rain nodded and sat up slowly. The datapad slipped from the bed and tumbled onto the ground. Rushing forward, Noble instinctively reached down to pick up the device, sending a shock up her arm as she made contact with the ground. Noble winced before putting the device on the nightstand. Rain's brows knitted in worry. Is everything okay? Noble smiled softly as she placed the datapad on the nightstand. I was going to ask you that question. I already told you I am fine. Rain's eyes darted away from her mother's face. Floating over to the edge of the bed, Noble lowered her head to the girl's level. What if I am looking for better than just fine? I can feel your anger and frustration, Rainy, and it worries me. I wish you wouldn't do that. Those are my private feelings. Rain covered her face and took a deep breath. I'm sorry. I know you said you cannot turn it off. I'm not angry though, at least I am trying not to be. Noble took a deep breath. But, you are angry with me. She kept the emotion out of her voice, making her words more of a statement than a question. Let's talk about it. Our big talk is what started this whole mess. Rain dropped her hands, her expression complicated. I was livid when you didn't show up for our meeting. You promised. You had put it off so many times, I just thought. You thought I was stalling for more time. Noble finished the sentence for her. I could see how you might think that way. I was delaying telling you, but not because I didn't trust you. I was wrong. I'm sorry. The girl clenched her fists. I said such ugly things about you to Dad that night. But then I saw the worried look on his face, and I knew something was wrong. Yet, I couldn't let go of my own selfish frustration. I promised myself when you came home that I wouldn't speak to you for a week. Rain's eyes darkened at the memory. Then Dad said you had gone to the dream realm. It didn't make sense. How could you just leave Dad without a word? And enter a nightmare? You went on a deadly adventure and didn't even say goodbye. It was cowardly and cruel. I know it looks bad on the surface. Noble stopped as Rain held up her hand. And yet, despite how you abandoned us, I have been missing you so badly, Mom. You have no idea. For weeks I wondered if you were alive and tried to convince myself it didn't matter. I couldn't worry about you. I needed to worry about me. But as more time passed, I missed you more and desperately wanted you home. I would have done anything to bring you back. The girl sighed. So when I saw you, I was so relieved. But seeing that you were perfectly fine and not dead in a dream realm made the anger well up in me again. I love you, so I tried to fight it, to be overjoyed like the boys. Rain's guilt flooded Noble, and the mother grabbed the girl's hand gently. But you couldn't fake it, so you went to your room instead. It felt so petty, but I didn't know what else to do. The dark-haired teen felt tears sting her eyes. I thought I finally had myself put together at dinner last night. I could justify that you were doing something for the greater good of humanity. But then you told of your adventure in the nightmare. You sounded like you were off having fun while we were here miserable. How selfish. Was your nightmare so important that you chose it over your promise to me, to our family? It isn't fair. Rain clenched her jaw as she continued. When you were gone, I felt like I was in a nightmare of my own. I couldn't sleep. I was worried that you were gone forever. That you would never come back. Then who would I tell my secrets to? I feel so safe when you were around, but without you, I wasn't strong enough. I needed you and you weren't here. I hated that feeling. Why couldn't I be strong enough? Tears streamed down the girl's face in earnest. So rather than feel weak, I just felt angry. It was easier. And now I cannot let it go. Rain looked desperately at her mother. Help me. Oh Rainy. Noble wrapped Rain in a hug. Tentatively, the mother sent a small amount of comfort to her fragile teen. That was all it took for the dam of emotions to break. Rain gasped, burying her head in her mother's shoulder in a silent sob. Noble's eyes welled with tears. There, my love. Let it out. Emotions are not a sign of weakness. You are stronger than you think. Not strong like you. Rain countered, sniffling. Noble clicked her tongue. You think I'm strong. Rain barked a bitter laugh. You were strong enough to take on a second nightmare. Noble frowned. That hadn't taken strength at all. It was a terrible accident. Perhaps if Noble had been stronger, then the portcullis key would have worked to get her out. If she had been stronger, then maybe she could have resolved the nightmare faster. If she had been stronger, maybe Kosi wouldn't have died before her eyes. This isn't about me. This is about Rain. Noble took another deep breath. I didn't want to enter that nightmare. I wanted to be here. I cried often. I missed you more than words. I am so sorry to have put you through this. Believe me when I say, the nightmare was horrible. I spent every moment of it either fighting for my life or longing to be with you. Thoughts of you and those 3 guys out there are what got me through the worst of it. You are kind of my hero. Noble nudged her daughter gently. Me, a hero. Rain furrowed her brow. Nodding, Noble gave a small smile. How does it feel? Horrible. Rain threw herself backward, sprawling out on the bed. I have spent the last 9 weeks having a pity party, and you think I'm a hero. It is just a burden you will have to bear, the older woman answered unapologetically. Though hopefully easier than all the other burdens you have had lately. It isn't fair that you've had to go through this. If you'll let me, I'd like to try and lessen those worries and clear a few things up. Rain nodded slowly. What would her mother say? Noble took a moment and collected her thoughts. When she began, her voice was soft and even. I love you and I always will. Nothing will ever change that. I did not leave because I wanted to. What happened was against my will. I agonized over breaking my promise to you. That was actually my final thought before the nightmare began. These weeks away from this family have been torture, and I put every bit of effort into getting back here to have this moment with you. You said I sounded happy to be in the nightmare, but really I was just so happy to be home. How could I ever be happy anywhere else when the 4 people I love most are here? You are my home. Nothing I can say or do can change the pain I have caused you. For that, I am so sorry. Oh, Mom. Rain wiped her eyes. I shouldn't have assumed the worst. I should know you wouldn't run off to a nightmare just to avoid a silly promise. Noble raised her right hand. I will fulfill that promise now. I will tell you everything I should have told you before I left and more. I'll tell you the real story of my nightmare and not some sanitized version that will cause you to leave before you finish your dinner. Rain flushed as her emotions spiked. The older woman raised one eyebrow. What is it? Scratching the back of her head, Rain shrugged. Don't get me wrong, I want to hear it all. It's just, your story isn't why I left dinner early last night. Oh, Noble curled her finger to encourage the teen to continue. Please, tell me more. When Brock mentioned the duel between Queen Bee and Mongrel, I remembered that she had fallen through a gate about the same time you disappeared. You and she have a similar build, and I thought for a moment that. Rain hesitated. Thought what? Noble felt the corner of her mouth twitch upward. The girl stuck out her lip. Never mind. It's silly. I promise you it isn't silly. Noble remembered when Rain was little and would often trail off mid-thought. It had taken some time after she was adopted for her to be comfortable sharing the things that were in her head. Before then, Noble would have to coax or provide options to learn how to meet her child's needs. Right now, her child needed to be heard. You can tell me anything, Noble assured her. Her heartbeat quickened. Rain looked at her mother for a moment before coming to a decision. At dinner last night, I got the crazy idea that you might be Queen Bee. But that's impossible. Why is that impossible? Noble quirked an eyebrow. Many reasons. For starters, your eyes don't match. Then there is the fact you have wildly different personalities. You are so mild-mannered and loving, and she looks ready to dice you to bits without a second thought. I hate to burst your bubble, but it is not impossible, Noble smirked. It's quite probable actually. That's because Queen Bee is me. Rain's mouth dropped open. No words would come. Or, if you prefer, I am Queen Bee. She is a persona after all. I came first. Noble smiled brightly. Why you mean to say that you are the mysterious Dreamscape champion? Yes, that's me. It felt so good to get the news off of her chest. She floated a little higher from the ground. But your eyes are plain blue. Rain shook her head in disbelief. It cannot be. Watch. Lamenting the loss of yet another skirt, Noble called forth her black and gold armor. Rain sat up and watched in shock as the familiar metal formed around her mother's body. She pinched herself to make sure she wasn't dreaming. It was all too strange. A few moments later, the fraudulent facade's delicate filigree wove around the lower half of the duelist's face. At last, Noble let her eyes swirl freely, giving Rain a peek at Queen Bee in her full glory. I can control the color of my eyes, or let them run wild, Noble explained, her voice distorted by the memory across her mouth. You mean, I've been trained by Queen Bee? Rain looked ready to faint. Sure, she had met other famous masters like Ascended Kai, and Ascended Athena, and even watched a movie with Ascended Changing Star, but she had been related to a famous Awakened for years and had no idea. You've been trained by your mother. Noble chuckled. Queen Bee wouldn't have shown any mercy, or given any tips since she doesn't speak. Noble ignored the fact she was speaking now through the mask. Queen Bee could talk, she just didn't. That's why you weren't here for those finales, and why Dad calls you Bee. All of the pieces started to click into place for Rain. I feel so stupid. If it makes you feel better, Dad called me Bee long before I was ever a duelist. He calls me that because I am always hovering over things. It is my flaw. I cannot touch the ground. Noble's eyes stopped swirling as held her breath. That explains it. Rather than another explosion of disbelief, Rain nodded contemplatively. What do you mean? Noble looked down at herself, adjusting her body back to its normal height from the floor. That look of pain when you picked up my datapad or anything that is on the ground. The ground hurts you, doesn't it? Rain pursed her lips. It does, Noble admitted with a frown. And when I am asleep, my body floats away unless it is held down. It's a brutal flaw, Rain sighed, then her eyes opened wide. Wait, you are Queen Bee. And Queen Bee fell through the gate months ago. I saw it on the news. Which means you fell through the gate months ago. Noble nodded. I did, and thanks to a quirk in one of my memories, I fell straight into a seat and had to conquer it. That means you didn't choose to leave at all. You were basically abducted while trying to defend the gate. Rain felt a new wave of grief at her own behavior. Oh Mom, I have been mad at you about something you couldn't control. I am so sorry. Rain flung herself against her mother in a hug. They both hovered in the air for a moment in silence. I'll never doubt you again. The girl promised. I will not even give you that opportunity, Noble said seriously. Rain took a deep breath, feeling a great weight had been lifted off of her shoulders. At last, she understood once and for all that her mother hadn't abandoned her for death or adventure. It had all been a series of unfortunate events. Blinking away tears, Rain pulled out of the hug. Why didn't Dad tell us what happened? He wasn't sure what happened at first himself. I know he was planning to tell you. Noble stopped. You know what? This sounds like a family discussion. I know I said I would tell you everything, but I think it would be best if we did this all together. That seems like a good idea. All the secrets will be hard to keep, and I want to be able to ask you and Dad questions at the same time. Rain thought for a moment. But what? Noble felt her daughter's spike in emotion. Can I be the one to introduce you like this? I want to see my brothers' faces when you make a big entrance. The girl grinned. Noble pursed her lips behind the mask. I suppose. Wait, a big entrance. What exactly do you have in mind? Die, filthy mongrel. Brock pressed the keys on his controller. The black device was meant to mimic something from the Dark Ages, but Brock didn't care about that just now. All he cared about was revenge. That's no way to talk to your father, Fort frowned. You should show me some respect. Having nothing to do while dinner cooked and Noble spoke to Rain, Fort had decided to join the boys in their battle royale to distract himself. It's just a game, Blaze answered, ducking below an invisible projectile. And considering what we are playing, Mongrel is kind of a compliment. You should be flattered. Yeah, Dad, Brock warmed to the idea. Why can't you take the compliment? Sitting on the couch, both boys smiled and bumped shoulders. The playing field of pretend duelists was quickly dwindling, making the fighting even more fierce. Back to back, Brock yelled to his twin. Don't let them get behind you. Suddenly a huge broadsword swung out of nowhere and chopped off both avatars' heads. The twins watched in shock as their fictional skulls fell to the dirt. A cry escaped both their lips. Dad, how could you? Don't you know you are supposed to go easy on your kids? Fort eyed their enraged faces with a shrug. As you pointed out, it is only a game. And by offing you properly, I treated you as equals. It's basically a compliment. You should be flattered. It seems like I'm not the only one who cannot take a compliment. The serious expression on Fort's face broke as he cackled. Oh wow, if looks could kill. You know what? I think I am going to patent that move. I'll call it the double paradise in red or the DPR. Or maybe I should just call it, the Fort. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? The father fell into a fit of giggling, causing the two boys to roll their eyes. And I thought we were supposed to be the immature ones, Blaze clicked his tongue. We are. Brock straightened his shoulders. I demand a rematch. Before the boys could pressure their father into playing another round, Rain strolled into the room with an elated expression. Blaze, Brock, you will never believe what I just found out. May I introduce? Not now, sis. Dad is about to learn what it means to die 100 horrible deaths. Blaze interrupted his sister. Rain glanced at the projector and frowned. What I have to tell you is way more important than a goofy game. You see, Both twins gasped at her words. Goofy. It's a Dreamscape simulator. Well, the video game version of the Dreamscape. It's as close as you can get to the Dreamscape without actually being in it. Brock crossed his arms. Oh. Rain raised one eyebrow. If it is so realistic, how in two worlds did Dad beat you both? No offense, Dad, the girl added with a good-humored shrug. Plenty of offense taken, Fort pretended to be appalled. Dad got lucky, Brock blew off his father's victory. It won't happen again. You think you're that good. Rain rested her hands gently on her hips. That video game has gone to your head. Has not. Brock tilted up his head defiantly. I am very capable. Of talking a big game, maybe. The dark-haired girl scoffed. But fighting, you have a lot to learn. In fact, if you are willing. How dare you say I can't fight? I already told you that Dad got lucky. Anyway, if this were real, I would have been able to show my true skill. The 12-year-old puffed out his chest, completely ignoring that he had just said the game was a good depiction of reality. His face pinched tight. I know you think you are so much better than the rest of us, Rain, but you must have forgotten that I've been training too. I'm practically a spear expert. The teen girl tapped her chin in contemplation. I see. So, if a champion of the Dreamscape walked into this room right now. Brock stood, poking his thumb against his chest. I'd look him right in the eye and challenge him without a second thought. So would Blaze. Who knows, with how good we have gotten lately, we might even fight and win. Rain's eyes lit with mischief. You would, care to put that to the test? Brock, Blaze tapped his brother's shoulder anxiously. Not now, I'm defending our honor. Brock glared at his sister. We're not afraid of any Dreamscape fighter, not me or Blaze. Leave me out of this, the other twin backed away slowly. Coward, Brock dismissed his twin with the click of his tongue. Rain smiled at the elder twin in his vibrato. So you would be willing to take on anyone from the Dreamscape? The dark-haired sister asked one last time. Absolutely, Brock doubled down on his outrageous claim. I could beat them any time, any place. Rain clapped her hands. That is excellent news. She looked at her father with satisfaction and added seriously. Dad, clear the floor. It's time for a battle. Fort, who had been watching this whole exchange with interest, furrowed his brow. Are you sure about this? Rain shrugged. Don't blame me. Brock is the one who wants to get stung. The father's eyes opened wide. Oh. To Brock's astonishment, Fort stood and pushed back the couch. What in the world was his dad doing? The boy paled slightly. You're in luck, dear brother. I happen to have one of the champions of the Dreamscape ready to battle you, right here, right now. Rain held up one finger and pointed to the hall. You're bluffing, Brock tilted up his chin slightly. You are just trying to make me back down. Rain stepped up on the couch, taking the stage with a triumphant grin. Gentlemen, I present to you the champion of the Dreamscape, Stinger of Souls, the one, the only Queen Bee. From the hall, a woman with polychromatic eyes and her signature black and gold armor floated into the room. A mask covered the bottom half of her face, making her expression impossible to discern. What? Brock took a step away from the newcomer. Why your Queen Bee? How? I mean, when did you get here? I was going to tell you, but you were too engrossed in your video game to listen. Though I guess I should thank you. It will be nice for her to beat someone else black and blue for a change instead of me. Rain chuckled. Blaze tore his eyes away from the imposing figure and eyed his sister carefully. He asked quietly, You've battled Queen Bee before. Many times. But this is not about me. This is about Brock. Queen Bee, my brother would like to challenge you. Rain opened her arms wide to indicate the makeshift arena of the living room. Brock staggered as if he had been struck. I never said that. Dad, you want help from a mongrel like me. Very well. Fort cleared his throat lightly. Queen Bee, please excuse us. My daughter has misquoted Brock. What he said was that he could beat you any time, any place. Dad. Brock covered his face. I'm a dead man, he muttered. The stoic duelist turned her gaze to the handsome director. A silent conversation passed between them. Eventually, the queen shrugged lightly and held out her hand toward Brock. Rain practically yelped in triumph. Queen Bee accepts your challenge. She asks that you select your weapon of choice. Seeing no way out of his predicament, Brock straightened his back and grabbed his twin's arm. Fine. Blaze and I choose spears. Blaze's eyes opened wide. I told you to leave me out of this. Too late. Brock gripped his brother's arm tighter. Mates for life. We are in this together. Blaze looked between his vindictive sister and his foolhardy brother. Suddenly, he wished he was an only child. Rain was too delighted to argue about an additional combatant. It was 2 for the price of 1. Sounds perfect. I will get the supplies. No one do anything interesting until I get back. She leapt from the couch and ran to retrieve weapons from her mother's dojo. While she was gone, Blaze squirmed out of his brother's grasp. This is insane. Are you really going to fight a couple of kids? Queen Bee, of course, made no response, but Blaze could almost swear her eyes swirled faster with amusement. Did she enjoy murdering children in front of their families? She really was as heartless as she seemed. Blaze turned a pleading eye on his father. The man seemed strangely calm. Did he not realize what was happening? Dad, you cannot let this happen. What about the furniture? Mom will have a cow. In fact, Mom is unavailable to help you at the moment, but I can assure you she would approve this match. There is no need to worry. Look, I brought 2 dummy spears and a wooden sword. Rain bounced back into the living room with unrestricted glee. A fake sword can still kill a real boy, Blaze pointed out as he had one blunt-tipped spear shoved into his palms. I don't think Mom would approve of our death, sir. You know, blood getting on the carpet. The teen shrugged. I mean, I'm sure she would understand. As Rain handed the wooden sword to Queen Bee and looked into her eyes, she coughed lightly. But, you make a valid point. We should have some ground rules. Thinking for a moment, Rain came to a conclusion. All right, the terms of battle are as follows. If you lose your weapon, you are out. Oh, and no blood or destroying furniture. Queen Bee shook her head. She pointed to the 2 boys and then touched her arm. Very well. If either of you manage to touch Queen Bee before she disarms you, she will const victory. Any questions? We just have to touch her. Even our spear counts. Blaze's mouth opened slightly in shock. The queen nodded. That was how it would work. Emboldened by the rules of the game, Brock lifted his spear. I'm ready. Queen Bee titled her chin, approval glistening in the eyes above her unreadable mask. Our father will act as the voice of the Dreamscape, if that is acceptable to you, Rain addressed the champion respectfully. At your service, your majesty. Fort bowed to the armored warrior. And if I may, I would like to talk to you about some merchandising options once we are through. Queen Bee gave the man a sharp look, but he simply smiled pleasantly and motioned to the makeshift arena. It was time to begin. Noble and Rain had agreed that the teen would be able to make the big reveal to her brothers. It was so nice to see Rain back to her livelier self, how could Noble say no? What she hadn't anticipated was that the video game simulator would cause her children to bicker. And with her ascended hearing, Noble could hear every blessed word. Noble chuckled to herself. Some things never change. By the time she was finally called to make an appearance, things had already gone sideways. Noble had the choice to ruin the fun or use this as a teachable moment. As a professor, the choice was easy. As a mother, it was less so. When Blaze called out to her, she nearly broke character. Her baby needed her. It was very hard not to speak. And since Rain and Fort were in on the secret, they took full advantage of her mute state. When Fort said he wanted to talk about Queen Bee merchandise, it took everything in her not to react. Over my dead body. Instead, she walked haughtily by him to enter the arena. It's not an arena. It's my living room. The boys had wrestled here before, but never with spears. Blunt-tipped or not, they could do some damage. Just makes it more of a challenge for me. A small smile formed on her face. Disarming the boys would be easy enough. She could do it in a single move, too, if she wanted them to each have their own special memory of being defeated by Queen Bee. But keeping them and their gear from bumping into the furniture or scraping the floor while they did everything possible to try and get in a single touch. That would at least be a little more of a challenge. Noble felt the wooden heft of the sword. With her ascended strength, she would be able to splinter it with her bare hands. It was an extra reason to be careful. 2 group duels today, she mused idly. Yet they couldn't be further apart. Noble took a fighting stance and the 2 boys' eyes opened even wider. But they did not back down. They lifted their spears and took on the challenge. Noble was especially proud of Blaze, who had been dragged into this by his elder brother. Once he realized that the clash was inevitable, he clenched his jaw and prepared for battle. His feet need work, but the grip is there, Noble noted. Brock was more cavalier in his position, giving up some of his safety in order to shield his brother from the opening move. The boys certainly took after each of their parents. Brock had a thirst for excitement, a penchant for leadership, and a protective nature just like his father. And studious Blaze was careful with his speech and deep in his thoughts. He also often seemed to find himself in the wrong place at the wrong time, but somehow still make the best of it. Sorry kiddo. And Rain mirrored a good mix of both her adopted parents, showing both determination and a curiosity for the unknown. But like the boys, she also had characteristics all her own, like the pettiness that had made her prank her brothers like this when they didn't want to listen. I wonder where she gets that from. The girl in question stepped between the boys and the armored warrior. Wait, this isn't quite fair, she pursed her lips. Finally, you are coming to your senses. Blaze's tense expression relaxed for a moment. What is she up to now? Noble knew there was no way her eldest child would let her siblings off the hook. Her suspicions were proven correct a moment later. We need to protect your heads, Rain pointed and her father gathered 2 bicycle helmets from near the door. Perfect. Here you go. I'm pretty sure this is child abuse. Blaze buckled the helmet as he rolled his eyes. But Brock had warmed to the idea considerably. If he was going to go out, he would do it in a figurative blaze of glory. Or a real one if they knocked something over and started a fire. Do your worst, he said, his expression openly defiant. For the record, Brock only speaks for himself. Blaze held up his spear in objection. Rain clapped her hands. Enough chit-chat. Let's see some carnage. Rain. Noble wagged her finger and glared at her daughter. The teen coughed. I mean, let's see some totally family-friendly action. Dad. Challengers Queen Bee, Brock, and Blaze have entered the living room. Fort mimicked the voice of Saint Thane while holding an invisible microphone. Challengers Blaze and Brock have challenged Queen Bee. Prepare for battle. Fort paused so he and Rain could step behind the couch. Begin. The start signal, the boys exchanged glances and came to a silent understanding. The only way that either of them would survive more than a second would be to split up and divide the duelists' attention. As avid studiers of the Dreamscape, this was the only tactic that had been even a little successful by those weaker than the Queen. And the only person who had ever been stronger was Mongrel. Their advantage lay in their twinship. They could communicate without a word. It was uncanny and bordering on telepathic. Queen Bee held still as Brock went right and Blaze went left. She had the decency to let them strike first, at least. They needed to make it count. Brock held up a single finger before gripping his spear with both hands. Then both boys came at the woman at once. Brock's point was aimed low while his brother's was aimed higher. The 2 angles meant that the famous duelist would have to move or be struck. All they needed was to touch her. Surely in the chaos, one of them could manage that feat. Queen Bee's sword lowered slightly and aimed toward Blaze. Brock's heart skipped a beat. This was too good to be true. He would not only get the touch but on his first try. His flicker of hope was quickly doused. In a blur of motion, the Queen of the Dreamscape all but disappeared. Blaze grunted as he was thrown unceremoniously to the side while Brock's spear caught only air. But just as the elder twin was about to crash into the couch from his overcommitment to the strike, the wooden sword of his opponent flashed before him. Rather than cut Brock down, the flat of the blade bumped against his chest and steadied him. The couch collision was only narrowly avoided. Whirling around, Brock tried to touch Queen before she could retreat. Sure, she had prevented him from face planting, but that didn't change the rules of the game. But as quickly as the mysterious duelist had appeared, she was out of his reach once more. Brock furrowed his brow. She's like a ghost. He looked toward Blaze. The other boy still had his weapon, but he seemed to be in a similar state of confusion. What had just happened? Queen Bee, meanwhile, stood between them like a statue. Only her eyes swirling broke the illusion that she hadn't turned to stone. Brock called to his dazed brother. "Come on." Together they let out an inhuman battle cry and descended on the beautiful warrior in a frenzy. The chase was on. But no matter how many times the twins tried to get a hit against their opponent, their strikes always ended one of three ways. A whoosh of air, a block from the bee's wooden blade, or, the most common outcome, hitting against the other twin's spear in accidental friendly fire. Blast it! Brock gripped his spear tightly as his feet slid to a stop on the ground. As impressive as the queen had been on the screen, she was even more spectacular in person. Her movements were flawless, almost robotic. She seemed to anticipate his moves before he even knew that he was going to make them. Add to that the fact that she never spoke, and Brock felt at a loss. Is she even human? Many people speculated that Queen Bee was just a figment of the dreamscape. Obviously, that was incorrect since she was here now. Maybe she was a robot like his mother's android, B2. "Are you B1? Brock blurted, his curiosity overcoming his frustration. "More like B prime. Fort snickered from the sidelines, earning an elbow in the ribs from his daughter. Brock had no time to process his father's words. Though he would never admit it, he was getting tired. Even with Queen Bee only on the defensive, it was like fighting against a brick wall and an illusory wraith all at the same time. Add into it that he was going all out just to get in a single touch against the warrior's armor, and Brock was spent. Blaze seemed equally winded. The sweat on his brow glistened and his breathing was heavy. But at least he hadn't given up. Since Blaze hadn't willingly gone into the match, he could have easily dropped his spear at any time and left the game. Brock would have to thank his brother later for not leaving him out in the cold. The elder twin could feel a shift in the cadence of the match. He instinctively knew he had one last opportunity before the passive duelist finally ran out of patience. "Blaze!" Brock yelled, both as a warning and as a distraction. His tactic worked. Queen Bee's eyes momentarily darted toward the younger twin while Blaze released a sigh of exasperation. Taking the cue, the elder twin spun his spear around his body in a way that would make his teacher scold him for being reckless. Then, in unison, both boys jumped on the coffee table and couch respectively and leapt into the air. It was a move they had seen countless times in webtoons. The pair themselves had been practicing this move since they could walk. Their agility and synchronicity were as good if not better than even some trainees of the legacy clans. They moved as one person on two bodies, aiming their spears at the queen's back and chest respectively. There was only one problem. Webtoon physics and real-world physics were not the same. Some awakened could manipulate the laws of nature to an extent, but mundane boys. Not a chance. So even though Brock and Blaze had timed and executed their maneuver perfectly, they were destined for failure. For as soon as Queen Bee shifted her weight to get out of their path, the boys were directly in the line of fire of another opponent, each other. In their shows, they would have bounced off of each other, rubbed their heads and moved on. But in reality, a collision like this with two spears, even blunted ones, was going to do some damage. Broken bones and bruised ribs were a likely outcome. Human bodies were not meant to collide at high speed. Brock was still trying to decide how to mitigate the damage when an object flashed in his peripheral vision. The butt of the wooden sword pressed into his shoulder, pushing him wide of Blaze's flailing body. Then in a blur of motion, two things happened. The blade whipped around, but rather than coming down like an axe on Brock's head, the broadside firmly tapped his hand, causing him to release the spear. Then like a serpent's tongue, the sword retreated from the mayhem, but not before tapping the other twin's hand in the same manner. As the boys reflexively let go of their weapons, both spears flew awkwardly away from their bodies. But then, somehow, inexplicably, Brock found his footing and landed on the carpet. He bent his knee to slow his progress and touched the ground with his fingers before righting himself. When he turned, his brother was in a similar position on the other side of the living space. But between them was a figure in shining black and gold armor. Her sword was sheathed and a spear rested gracefully in each hand. Ford leapt over the couch and raced forward. He raised the duelist's right arm in the air. Challengers Brock and Blaze have been eliminated. Queen Bee has won. He turned to the duelist. Are you ready to receive your prize? Brock quirked an eyebrow. There had been no mention of any prize. Blaze was equally confused. A moment later, their confusion turned to panic. Dad, what are you doing? When Queen Bee nodded to receive her prize, she had swapped the spears into one palm and held out her free hand. But Ford had taken hold of the armored gauntlet and done something unexpected. Instead of giving her a trophy, Ford pulled the duelist into his arms, dipped her, and proceeded to bring his mouth towards her mask. The delicate metal barely disappeared in time. Brock and Blaze could hardly believe their eyes. Their father was kissing Queen Bee. In front of them. In their living room. Stop it! Brock screamed, too shocked to move. The Queen's back was to him now, but she didn't seem to be pulling away. Why wasn't she stopping him? Was her arm coming up to his shoulder? What was happening? Brock's brain felt like breaking. But Mom, he sputtered. I'm very impressed by that performance from both of you. You took that duel very seriously. The voice had come from the woman in armor, further stunning Brock. Queen Bee can talk, and she sounds just like Mom. Brock's second phrase was more to himself than the room. Blaze, who had a better angle than his brother, was a step ahead. It is Mom, he said, his voice shaking at the revelation. The brunette warrior spun around with a wide smile on her face. Hello Brock. Hello Blaze. As I said, it's very good to see that you have been practicing so hard. That was very fun. The hair was wilder than usual and the eyes were ever changing with color, but the face, Brock knew it almost as well as his own. Mom. His eyes grew nearly as big as his face. Ford grinned with amusement as Brock began to put the pieces together. You were kissing Mom. Of course, Ford winked. I wouldn't ever consider kissing anyone else. Brock stuttered, but that means. Mom is Queen Bee. Blaze stepped forward, poking Noble's pauldron gently. It's logical really, now that I think about it. The younger twin leaned in to examine the metal more closely. Noble chuckled lightly. You like it? It's even cooler in person, Blaze nodded. I especially like the overlapping plates here. That gives you extra protection and also ease of movement. I had no idea you were interested in armor. Noble disengaged from her husband to hold out her gauntlet for her son to see. Blaze rubbed the back of his neck. It's a recent hobby. In case the spell should infect me, I wanted to have a solid knowledge of how to select armor if I get a choice. There was some hesitation in Blaze's expression, but Noble quickly soothed him. It is wise to be ready for whatever might come. I am glad you are thinking ahead. She hugged her younger twin and tousled his hair. What is wrong with you people? Brock blinked at them uncomprehendingly. Are we really not going to talk about how Mom is Queen Bee? How did this happen? When? He turned a critical eye on his sister. You knew and you didn't tell me. Rain crossed her arms and leaned against the back of the couch. I just found out myself. I actually came in here to tell you, but you were so engrossed in your little game that you wouldn't listen. Maybe next time you should give your big sis a little more of your attention. Brock blew out his cheeks, unsure of how to answer such an accusation. Noble chuckled softly as she brought her other son into a hug as well. How and when, you asked? I have been Queen Bee since right after you were born. It is my hobby, I suppose. Your dad got the pod, and I thought it might be a good way to brush up on my skills. I never thought I would be as decent at fighting as I am. Noble shrugged. Decent, she says. Brock scoffed. You are a champion of the Dreamscape and you say you are a decent fighter. There's being modest and then there is being absurd. The duelist shrugged. Even after the second nightmare, the thought that Noble was anything better than a passable warrior still felt strange. There were so many awakened that were more powerful than her, not to mention how high enough category Nightmare Gate could obliterate not only her but the entire region. It would be foolish to boast about her own strength. I do what I can, Noble said at last. Anyway, I am glad you all know. That is only the beginning. There is so much more I want to tell. More. Ford raised an eyebrow at her. Are you sure? Disappearing like I did has shown me I need to get this all out in the open. I think it is the only way we can move forward. Tilting her head, Noble gave a small smile. It is time. Taking her hand, Fort kissed her gauntlet gently. If you are certain. I am, but it might be easier if we did it all over a hot meal. When will dinner be ready? Noble sniffed experimentally at the air. Dinner. Fort blanched as he ran to the kitchen. The other four looked at each other with a mix of amused and concerned expressions. A puff of steamy smoke accompanied the opening of the oven. Fort coughed as he pulled out the synthetic meat. It's all right. He forced a smile. I always like my food on the well-done side, don't you? Thankfully no one was in the mood to dispute his claim. The kids were far too eager to hear what their mother had to say, and Noble loved her husband far too much to ever disparage his cooking. Even on some of his worst days, the director could still pull out a passable dish, which this one ended up being as well. While not gourmet, it was still quite edible. The table conversation was especially lively this evening. The children peppered their mother with questions as she told them about her adventures in the Dreamscape. She had had no idea that they had been paying such close attention to her persona's career. How had they seen so much of her work? When pressed, Fort looked away and asked Rain if she needed more potatoes. That was all the answer Noble needed. As the evening went on, Noble told of her first nightmare, awakening, and then jumped to the nightmare gate and finally her second nightmare. After the first revelation about their mother being Queen Bee, the children were receptive and attentive to the other information she had to offer. Noble was careful not to get too graphic in her description of events, but she also didn't hold back when it came to sharing some of the more difficult obstacles. So you see, she said, concluding her tale, I did not want to leave you, and the time while I was gone was nothing short of horrific. To be right here with all of you is what I want most in the world. Fort hung his head. I am sorry I didn't communicate better. I didn't realize how my struggles were affecting all of you. That was wrong of me. If he had known that Rain was struggling so hard, he would have pushed aside his own grief and been honest with her in a heartbeat. It's okay, Dad. I think I get it now. You were hurting, not trying to hurt me. Rain nodded slowly. It would take a little time for her to fully trust her father again, but after the talk this evening, she at least thought it was possible. What I'm most hurt by is the fact I'll never see your stock in person, Brock complained around a bite of food. Don't be too upset. Look, Noble scooted back from the table and stood. In her hands, the zenith manifested. I got this from the bloom of doubt. The three children rose from their seats to get a closer look at the beautiful sword. Even Fort's attention was captivated by the new weapon. This is amazing. Rain knew a good weapon when she saw one. The corner of Noble's lips twitched upward. You think that's amazing? Using her telekinesis, Noble cleared the furniture closest to the dining table. This would require some space. Here goes. Noble summoned the orb which she had been reluctant to touch since returning from the nightmare. The space beside her filled with sparks, causing both her children and husband to scoot back instinctively. A few moments later the sparks solidified. The creature before them was halfway between what would have been considered a cat and a dog, only larger than a horse. His golden fur looked velvety smooth, except for where it jutted out around his face in a haphazard mane. His dark eyes looked as proud as they did innocent. But they also looked empty. Noble's smile turned sad. She had intended to show Sarai and Nickel her new echo, but time had not permitted it. So this was the first time seeing her friend since his death. For this was Kosi. No, it's an echo. Kosi is gone. To be fair, the real Kosi had died countless years before. What Noble had known had always been just a recreation, only her emotions toward him had been real. Whoa. Blaze was the first to snap from his amazement. You have an echo. He's a Simkus, Noble informed them. When I killed Kosi, I received an echo from the spell. Oh, B. Fort was filled with compassion for his wife. Can I pet him? Blaze brazenly stepped toward the creature's jaw. Echo or not, the Simkus could still eat the child in barely 2 bites. But Blaze trusted that his mother had control of the situation, and his fascination was greater than his fear. The kids had not seen many animals in their lives. Aside from the occasional bird, their only interactions with living animals were at the NQSC's exotic aquarium. And those were only small creatures. Nothing nearly as large as this demon. You see a noble creature for the first time and your automatic reaction is to pet it like a house cat. Rain clicked her tongue at her younger brother. You're right, Blaze tapped his chin. Can I ride him? Me next. Brock didn't want to be left out. Before either boy could gain access to the Simkus's back, a subtle rumble emanated from the creature's chest. Noble was startled. She looked at the demon with a tense expression. His face turned towards hers, the empty eyes still showing some expression. Noble felt something stir in her soul. A connection with the golden Simkus tugged at her heart. The echo was a recreation of the spell, yet there was a tangible quality to him. While crude, the creature before her had something akin to feeling. It was nothing like the mighty emotions of the transcendent demon, but it was sensed by Noble's ability just the same. Reaching out, Noble laid her hand on the Simkus's mane. It was so soft. She petted him gently. The golden creature reacted to her touch by nuzzling against her palm. Was that because she willed him to her because the beast had a mind of its own? Smiling at her new echo, Noble decided not to think about it too deeply. I think we should take it slow. No rides today, but petting him is probably fine. Blaze didn't wait for confirmation before his hand shot out to touch the velvet coat. He's so soft. When nothing bad happened to the youngest child of the family, the other two children followed his lead and stroked the golden Simkus. After a moment, the creature purred softly. He seemed sweet. Rain rested her head against the creature's side in a modified hug. Does that mean we have a pet? Blaze asked, looking at the echo with curiosity. If by pet you mean something attached to my soul sea that is also a transcendent demon, then I suppose. Noble hadn't exactly given the matter much thought. Our very own pet. Brock nodded excitedly. What shall we call him? Call him. Noble furrowed her brow. When she had decided to show her family the echo, it was to soften the blow of seeing a replica of Kosi. She had hoped their excitement and awe would help her cope with her recent loss. And they were all very excited. Too excited except Fort, who was eyeing the large beast in his house with a pensive expression. The other three were brimming with overwhelming energy, reminding Noble of when they were toddlers. They had wholeheartedly embraced the idea of having a new creature in the house in a matter of moments. Noble glanced at the echo's runes. She knew from morbid curiosity that human echoes were labeled by their given name or true name if they had one. But the line next to this creature's name simply said, Noble Simkus. For a moment Noble thought it might be labeling it as hers, but the lack of the possessive apostrophe meant that the Kosi was a noble creature when he died. The creature before her was simply a Simkus. Noble hummed softly. The spell didn't give him a name. He needs a name, Brock insisted. We won't know what to call him otherwise. We should name him something sweet. I love it when powerful things have cute names. Rain patted the Simkus's mane gently. Brock scrunched his face. No, he needs a powerful name. Something to reflect his might. Look at those muscles. They are even bigger than mine. Brock flexed his biceps. You can't give someone like him a wimpy name. I think Mom should decide. Blaze looked at his mother. You should pick a name, Mom. A name. Noble faltered. The echo turned its furry head and looked at her also. This was too much pressure. The echo snorted, sending a wave of air through the room that blew the curtains on the far side. He sat down and stared at the matriarch of the household as well. His tail curled and released impatiently. Noble couldn't even catch a break from her own echo. The golden fur around the creature's neck rippled at her thought. If Noble didn't know better, she would think the beast was laughing at her. But that, of course, was absurd. Her brain was just projecting her own insecurity on the only non-speaking being in the room. Taking a deep breath, Noble ran through a dozen names in the span of an instant before dismissing them. None of them did the golden beauty justice. She had had 9 months to think of the boys' names, and Rain and Seb had arrived in her life already named. How was she supposed to come up with the perfect word to encompass this fluffy demon on the spot? I just need one name this time, not two. Names had a lot of meaning. And the process of naming had the potential to be deeply personal. In a way, Noble felt that by giving the golden being his own identity, she was attempting to replace Kosi. The thought gripped her heart. But then she reminded herself that no matter what, Kosi would have remained when she left the nightmare. The creature before her was called an echo because it was a recreation, a reminder, of the original. This would remind her of the Simkus that she had come to love. This is Kosi's legacy. As long as I have him, I can honor what Kosi did for me. While that did help settle the issue in her soul, it didn't do anything to help the 4 pairs of eyes staring directly at her. In the end, she decided to follow her father's rule of kiss, keep it simple, stupid. It was a rather crude rule, but it was a helpful reminder to her to never overcomplicate her life. That's what the spell was for. Something simple. He's golden. He's big. His fur reminds me of the sun. No, that name is already taken. So I'll go for the next best thing. Helios, Noble announced with confidence. His name will be Helios. Helios. As soon as the name left Noble's lips, she couldn't think of naming him anything else. It was not only an ancient name in the human world which meant sun, it was also remarkably similar to the word for joy in her family's gibberish. And the creature which Helios resembled had brought her comfort in the heart of her nightmare. It was a very fitting name. Much better than accidentally naming it after our neighbor. That would have been awkward. Helios sniffed again, but this time there was no force behind it. He lay all the way on the ground, seemingly content with how things had turned out. Helios. I like it. Brock punched the air with his fist. I suppose I can get used to it. Rain pursed her lips. With your naming sense, you would have called him Yellow or Big Cat. Blaze rolled his eyes at his elder sister. Would not. Rain countered, her ears burning. Noble could tell by her emotions that the young man had come much closer to guessing Rain's thoughts than she would ever admit. Fort continued to stare at the strange being that was now taking up almost the entire space between his table and the scooted sofa. Helios, he said at length. It's a good name. I am glad you approve. Noble smiled warmly at her husband. I was beginning to think you might not like him. I am just shocked. Fort pushed back his blonde hair from his forehead with an amused grin. You are always full of surprises, my love. Of all the things I expected to happen today, this was not on my list at all. What did you expect? Noble raised one eyebrow at her husband. Nothing, Fort lied, a hint of mischief in his eye. His wife opened her mouth to inquire further when he stepped toward her quickly. In an instant, his face was a whisper away from her. Noble's breath hitched. He lifted his hand, but instead of touching her face, Fort reached out and laid his hand on the graceful creature's mane. He's magnificent. Fort's eyes didn't move from the woman before him, just like his master. That's true. Blaze piped up, causing the couple to separate slightly. Noble blushed heavily. She had momentarily forgotten her children were watching. What is true? Since he is an echo, you can tell him what to do. He can battle with you. Or for you. Blaze began to imagine how that fight would look. I don't like the idea of just standing by when there is danger near. Noble shook her head. Don't I know it? Fort teased with a little bitterness in his voice. However, I do like the idea of you having some extra protection when you go headlong into trouble. The director turned to Helios and whispered in his ear. Take good care of her and protect her from danger. Perking up his ears, Helios suddenly stood as his muscles tensed. The family backed up to give the massive creature room. Not now, boy. Fort meant in the future. We are quite safe. Noble double-checked to make sure nothing else was in the house. Other than the inexplicable protective presence that she could occasionally sense around Rain, nothing was amiss. Helios relaxed. I want to see him in action so bad. Brock whined. Isn't there any way you could show us what he can do without, actually destroying anything? Noble chuckled softly, no way that immediately comes to mind. Sure, she could fly them a few at a time to outside the city and try some maneuvers. But that would be reckless. If something attacked, she would be responsible for any harm that came to her family. And trying out a new echo inside the city limits would not only make the neighbors gossip, It could do some real damage if Noble made a mistake. What about the Dreamscape? Blaze suggested. They have battles with echoes there, don't they? Indeed, just like the illusory arenas held duelists, they also had a part of the Dreamscape dedicated to battling with echoes. As Noble had only ever had memories in her soul sea, the place was completely untouched by Queen Bee. Wait, if you are a master, you won't be able to duel anymore yourself, will you? Rain realized now that the topic had been broached. Only for exhibitions unless they open a new option for masters. There just aren't very many ascended and the few that exist are very busy, so there isn't much need for Dreamscape to accommodate them. Noble had already come to terms with this fact. Short of asking Saint Thane for a favor, her days competing in the Dreamscape as her alter ego were through. That's perfect. Blaze clapped his hands excitedly. What is? Noble's eyes widened. What was perfect about her losing access to her hobby? You can go to the Dreamscape as Queen Bee and take Helios with you. I am sure we can find a stream of the battle as soon as you appear. Then we can watch him in action. Blaze's eyes glistened with pure excitement. I don't know, Noble pursed her lips. I don't think it is a good idea. If she were to show up with the Simkus in the Dreamscape, then anyone who saw him with her at the academy or anywhere else would be sure to notice that he was the same type of creature. Her fraudulent facade was pretty powerful, but Sarai and the Chancellor had been able to connect the trail back to her with only a few tiny breadcrumbs. How much more would a huge demon-sized breadcrumb lead others back to her hidden identity? More than that, Noble could feel pain in the Dreamscape. If for some reason the Echo could also feel pain, she didn't feel good about forcing Helios to put himself in harm's way for sport. Please. Blaze's and Brock's eyes grew as big as their faces. Even Rain seemed intrigued by the prospect, though she wouldn't show it. There are a couple of problems you aren't considering. Noble's communicator buzzed at her side. She glanced at it for a moment, and her mouth grew taut. What is it? Fort could see that the message had disturbed her. The professor handed her husband the device as she spoke. Well, I was going to say that using Helios in such a manner poses a huge risk of my identity getting out, but it seems like I am too late for that. Fort looked at the communicator. The buzz is that you have returned to the waking world as more than just Queen of the Dreamscape. If you have some time tomorrow, I would like to get an interview. The message went on to suggest a time and place. It was from none other than the Nonsensefree reporter, Frey. Seems the bee is out of the bag, Fort winked. If he found out on his own, others will too. There is nothing like a woman falling mysteriously in and out of a gate to pique people's curiosity. Noble sighed. Part of her had already realized she would need to come out in the open. The professor had just hoped it wouldn't be so soon. I guess that is that. You said there were a couple of problems, Rain reminded her mother. What was the other? Helios entered my soul sea only 2 days ago. He may have been formed fully grown, but I don't know what he can do or how to work with him. Noble had found fighting alongside Kosi to be intuitive. She had no guarantee that the Echo would be the same. More than that, I don't want him to get hurt. The pain I feel in the Dreamscape is temporary but very real. Helios snorted as the hair on his mane stood on end. He growled softly. Noble felt the connection between them change slightly. The Simkus was indignant. When his eyes turned on her, she could almost hear the question in her mind. You really think I will get hurt? Noble sighed. You want to go fight in the Dreamscape? The void in the Echo's eyes darkened slightly. The answer was yes. Seems everyone is against me. Noble shook her head with a weary smile. She stared at the pleading eyes of her children. Fort kept his face neutral, but now that even the Echo had shown interest in a match, he was watching the scene with an intensity that Noble knew meant he was curious too. Noble tapped her chin. Please. The twins pressed their hands together in silent prayer. Helios agreed. Why can't you? Brock poured. I didn't think Echoes had a mind of their own. Fort took a step back as Helios looked at him. Of course, I could be wrong. He added. The Simkus grunted softly and turned back to his master with a snort. Then he yawned, revealing a gaping maw of razor-sharp teeth. Look at that face. That right there is the face of a champion. Brock scratched under the creature's chin. You're going to be great. Blaze assured the Simkus. You'll knock 'em dead. I'm sure of it. Yeah, you'll murder them all without mercy. Brock added. First Rain asked for familial carnage, and now you boys want to see the arena run red. I had no idea I raised such bloodthirsty children. Noble scowled in mock severity. It's all for fun, Brock crossed his arms. We don't want anyone to really die or anything, just their fake versions, like in the video game. Yeah, we don't want anyone to be decapitated in real life, Blaze nodded. Decapitated? You mean fortified? Their father winked. All three children groaned in unison. The director sighed. A man can't even make a good pun in his own home without being judged. What do you say, Mom? Will you do it? Brock turned back to the original conversation. Quote. Fine. Noble sighed. Yes. The twins bumped fists. I'll make the popcorn. Brock moved toward the kitchen. I'll reset the projector. Blaze went in the opposite direction. I'll start searching to see which arenas are already on a live feed so we can catch it from the beginning. Rain pulled out her communicator and started clicking on the screen. Wait, you want me to do it right now? Noble knew that her children were motivated to make this happen, but she had somehow thought that they would give her a little time to mentally prepare. Their hurried preparation suggested that they believed if they didn't act quickly, they might miss the event entirely. Don't you all need to go to bed? Midterms start tomorrow. Noble wanted to hit her forehead because of her own foolishness. Her timing with all of this information had been terrible for her children's educational careers. We will go right to bed after the match, Brock assured her. And the easy classes are tomorrow anyway. I could do them with my eyes closed. That sounds like something you would try, Blaze rolled his eyes. Be nice, Noble bit her lip. As for the Dreamscape, But the kids were no longer listening. Noble's shoulders drooped. Fort motioned for his wife to come close to him. Using the Simkus's body to give them some privacy, his voice dropped to a whisper. You've had a long day. Long didn't begin to describe it. Today alone, she had found out her father was likely murdered, gone to the government to be interviewed, spent lunchtime and her afternoon exploring her new home in the dream realm and making some startling discoveries. Then she had come home to sort through the emotions of her teenage daughter, sparred with her twin boys, and then laid bare all of her secrets before her family. As if reading her thoughts, Fort nodded. Beyond that, I know the past few days have been very emotional for you. If you're not ready for this, I'll be the bad guy and tell them they have to wait. You have been through a lot. Perhaps a battle right now isn't the best idea. Fort took his wife's hand and squeezed it softly. I call dibs on the recliner. Brock yelled from the kitchen. Only if you don't burn the popcorn, Blaze answered. Mom, I think I found the perfect spot. Rain's voice called over the other two. Noble took a deep breath. Was she ready to go back into a real battle? No, but this wasn't a real battle. It was a skirmish between two echoes. The bigger issue that Fort was alluding to was not her battle readiness, but her mental state. Noble had just seen Kosi die by her hand. What would happen if her echo got injured or died in the ring? She would know it wasn't real in her head, but her heart might have different feelings. Noble looked at Helios with a pensive expression. The Simkus exuded a confident air. On the plus side, the Dreamscape would be a safe place for her to discover her echo's skills. There was no threat of him getting permanently destroyed, so they could try things that she might not dare to do otherwise. You really want to do this, Helios? Noble whispered. The purr of response was all she needed. The seasoned duelist gave a small smile to her husband. I think it will be fine. And it will make the kids happy. I owe them that after all the misery I have unintentionally caused them. But just one round, I think. Just to see what happens. Noble made the rule for herself. Fort pressed his lips together. What? Noble furrowed her brow. Nothing, he smirked before walking away toward the couch. I just saw that shimmer in your eye. You were a little excited yourself at the prospect. No, I am doing this for all of you. Noble protested. She was not bloodthirsty like her children. So, why were her cheeks burning? Of course, a Dreamscape champion who doesn't want to take on a new challenge. That sounds just like you. Fort kissed his wife's forehead. I'll see you eventually, my love. I mean it. I am just going to do one battle. Noble furrowed her brow. Fort walked toward the couch. You hear that? Mom's only going to do one round, everyone. I am. Noble started to defend herself. Did Fort not realize that she wanted to spend time with them more than in the dreamscape? But the duelist realized it was no use. She would just have to show him. Okay, Mom. I found it for sure. Rain hurried forward to take her father's place at Noble's side. This one looks like the best option. It's a huge arena, but only a few battles are taking place there right now. Looking at the screen, Noble memorized the name. Got it. Yes, you do. Rain gave her mother a thumbs up. After patting Helios one last time, Noble dismissed the massive creature from the room. All right, I guess I'm ready. Go, Mom. You are the best. Brock brought a bowl of buttery white pillows from the kitchen toward the couch. We are behind you all the way. Blaze pumped his fist in his mother's direction. Thank you. Noble forced a smile. Somehow, the show of support actually made Noble more nervous. Now that her children knew who she was, there was no longer a wall between QueenBee and herself. Rain's affirmative gesture and the boys' raucous cheers made her feel an intense wave of pressure not to disappoint them. When she was anonymous, it didn't matter if she won or lost. No one would ever attribute that victory or loss to the memory professor who taught at the Awakened Academy. But those days were coming to a close. No, they were already gone. Her identity was now a loosely kept secret at best, leaking out like a sieve with each passing hour. Even if she asked Frey not to out her, some other reporter eventually would. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but very soon. When the story broke, all of her past and present actions in the dreamscape would fall squarely on her shoulders. Noble wasn't ashamed of anything she had done there, but at the same time, it felt like another person had done them. So if her last time in the dreamscape was a loss, even if it wasn't technically her loss, would be the thing that people would latch on to. Noble's eyes swirled with determination. Then I better not lose. The dreamscape pod felt alien around her ascended body. Well, it had been a long time since she had been in any pod at all. Even her regular pod was bound to feel strange. But the sensation only lasted a moment before her consciousness faded. Enter dreamscape. Yes, Noble focused on the appropriate answer. Her vision darkened as the duelist found herself in the starry void. Noble barely had time to double-check that her armor and fraudulent facade were in place before the voice of the dreamscape invaded the darkness. Welcome, QueenBee. The voice boomed. Noble resisted the urge to cover her ears. Please, choose the dream of your liking. Very interesting. Many of the options were grayed out, inaccessible to her except as a spectator. There was only one reason that Noble could think of for this change. The dreamscape could tell she was an ascended. While the spelltech didn't give away her identity or location, it still needed to make a copy of her for the augmented reality. It replicated her aspects, abilities, and memories. Of course, it mirrored her rank as well. The gray options seemed like a challenge to her. She tilted up her chin defiantly. HMPH, after all my time as a champion, they suddenly want to keep me out. Her pride almost got the better of her, but then the runes in front of her shimmered slightly. The arenas weren't completely inaccessible then. It was just discouraged. Noble suspected she could select the option and enter the arena as a combatant anyway, but she decided not to try. There was no reason to anger the saint of the dreamscape by going against his recommendations. Somehow she didn't think he would feel kindly toward a master who came in, slaughtered everyone without an ounce of effort, and then left when the arena was empty. Anyway, she hadn't come here for herself but for her children. And they wanted to see Helios in action. Searching through the options, Noble selected the area for echo encounters. The shimmering runes disappeared. Noble blinked. Select echo. Oh, for a moment Noble thought she had done something wrong, but it seemed she hadn't met the requirements to continue. Beside her, Helios materialized in the endless void. Echo selected. Name Echo. Noble was suddenly glad her children had forced her to pick something before coming. While she could decline the option to name or simply call it a Simcus, it felt wrong. Helios, she answered. Helios is being added to the Dreamscape Echoes registry. There was a long pause. Registry updated. Name, Helios. Weight class, medium. Ah, so that's how it works. Noble wasn't sure how they divided up echoes or even if they did. She suddenly felt like she should have done more research before diving in. A second thought crossed her mind. Wait, medium weight class. She glanced at the massive creature that could comfortably carry at least a couple of people. What size constitutes large? Before she could muse for long, a whole new menu of choices that Noble had never seen was displayed before her vision. Some of the arenas were duplicates of the human duelists, but others were completely new and foreign. Noble looked through all the options. Where is it? For a moment she thought maybe Rain hadn't known about the weight classes and had chosen the wrong one. But then she spotted it. There. The void around her faded. Queen Bee and Helios have entered the field of flowers. All around Noble, a plain of lush grass formed for as far as the eye could see. There were no spectators to be seen, real or imaginary. If anyone was using their Dreamscape pod to watch the match, they were invisible to the naked eye. What was visible though, were the half-dozen duels already in progress. Each pair had their own grassy knoll with a thick patch of flowers surrounding it. If not for the carnage of the echoes, the place would have been idyllic. This is too pretty to be an arena. What's with the lovely poppies all over the place? The blood-red flowers covered the landscape in a crimson blanket, looking like a royal robe. To Noble's left, two echoes were in the final throes of what must have been an epic clash. The large beetle with chitin armor was paired against a sand monster with particles like a razor's edge. The beetle barreled through the sandy creature, but it dissipated and materialized behind its opponent, unaffected by the charge. The beetle let out a hideous hiss and a small arc of electricity flew between its wiry antennae. But before the insect coils make another strike, the Sandman faded into the ground. Noble looked at the creature's handler with a keen eye. His confidence and cool demeanor suggested he had not decided to give up. Sure enough, his emotions spiked a moment later. Here it comes. The beetle looked confused, searching for its opponent with 6 prismatic eyes. But it was looking for the sand monster in all the wrong places. It should have been looking down. The beetle and its master came to this realization a moment too late. Like a spike, the sand monster shot up from the ground in an attempt to impale the armor of the other beast. The beetle hissed, bringing the pincher of his frontmost arm down to snap at the attacker. The sand smashed against the armor with a deafening crash, but somehow the chitin held. That didn't stop the force of the hit from taking its toll. The beetle was knocked into the air at frightening speed. Which wouldn't have been a problem, but unlike other beetles, this one did not have wings. It sailed in an arc and landed far outside the circle, compressing a large portion of the field of poppies. Interesting maneuver, but it would even leave a scratch. Noble felt Helios tense. Then her own eyes opened wide. The flowers did not simply cushion the echo's fall. They released a fine mist of yellow pollen that clung to the smooth black surface. The beetle struggled against the yellow mist and then grew still. A strange sound like a snort came from the wild beast. No, it was a snore. The beetle was fast asleep. Tankmaster and Tanktastic have been eliminated. Gaspda and Sandslayer have won. The beetle and its owner, Tankmaster, disappeared in a rain of sparks. What just happened? From the looks of it, being expelled from the ring here meant automatic elimination. It was a bit like the cloud arena that Noble had competed in with Fireshing long ago. Stay in the ring, Noble sent the mental note to Helios. He looked at her and nodded. Good. Noble hadn't actually tried to send a command to the creature before, so she was relieved to know that it did not need to be audible. That was helpful. The ring around Sandslayer and his master opened wide as the flowers seemed to run apart to create a wide path. The moving plants circled behind them, forcing the pair to rejoin the master ring. Noble stared as the victor was ushered back from his match with a confident grin. His eyes fell on Noble and one word escaped his lips. You. Queen Bee looked at the young man's pointing finger as her eyes swirled with indifference. She gave a short nod. What about me? Helios seemed to take offense at the sudden gesture, as did the two other participants who had just returned from their respective rings. The golden cat took a step forward to protect the duelist from the man's accusation. Seeing the sharp teeth of the echo, Gaspé lowered his hand. Easy, now. His eyes shifted back to the black and gold warrior. What I mean is, why you're Queen Bee. I saw you fall through the gate on TV and disappear from the dreamscape. You're back. The other two duelists relaxed and also turned their attention to the floating woman. They had not paid attention to the announcement of her entry while in their own duels, but now they wished they had. They were witnessing the re-entry of the queen after weeks of being missing. And in an arena with an echo. This was history in the making. Gaspé realized the implication a moment before the other two. He nodded at his sand monster and they both raised their hands. Gaspé and Sandslayer have challenged Queen Bee and Helios. The queen dipped her head in recognition. She had felt his emotions spike just before the challenge was issued. A line of flowers cut off the two teams from the others. Queen Bee floated with Helios by her side as a path of grass opened up before them. A few moments later they were in a circle far from the main arena. Noble glanced over her shoulder to see that the other two challengers had not paired off to form their own duel. They were still staring, seemingly frozen in place with their echoes. It seems like we will be having a live audience after all, Helios. The Simcus snorted. Let them watch. The sandy monster silently slunk along the ground next to Gaspé. The young awakened smiled confidently. Queen Bee could guess his thoughts. She had managed to conquer both the individual and group tournaments in her extensive career. But she had never entered this part of the dreamscape. Today Bee would not be the one fighting. And Gaspé would teach her that not every place in this semblance of reality was so easy to conquer. Planting his feet firmly, Gaspé signaled he was ready. At least he was enough of a gentleman not to try a surprise attack. Don't worry, Helios. You've got this. It's time to take down the sandy menace. And fast. You saw what he can do, so I think you need to keep moving or you will end up impaled. I could be wrong, but I do not think your skin is quite as tough as that armor. Bee mused. There was no way of knowing the rank and class of the beagle they had seen, so it was best to remain cautious at least at first. Helios grunted. The queen nodded to her opponent. She was as ready as she would ever be. Inside her heart raced. This kind of adrenaline rush was why she had come back to the dreamscape on nights while her family slept. The uncertainty, the excitement, and the ever-changing terms of the battlefields were all intoxicating for the mighty queen. She loved to strategize and see her plans come to fruition. When Sandslayer rushed forward, Bee only had a moment to communicate with Helios before impact. Dodge the first attack and then. Helios leapt forward and roared. The pulse from his voice was enough to dissipate part of the sandy monster into particles. But the Simcus was not done. As soon as he had finished breathing out, he took a massive breath, pulling all the air around him into his lungs. Even Gaspé had trouble staying on his feet many meters away. At first, the dispersed particles of sand resisted the mighty rush of wind, but it could not last. Gritty air passed into Helios' mouth, sand coating his pink tongue. Soon a small mountain of dirty sand filled his mouth. Then Helios shut his jaw and swallowed. Bee could almost swear she heard the satisfied smack of the Simcus's lips before he licked his mouth triumphantly. The sand monster was no more. Gaspé and Sandslayer have been eliminated. Queen Bee and Helios have won. What? Gaspé watched in horror. He ate my. The duelist disappeared in a rain of sparks. Helios burped. Bits of sparks left his mouth as well. Queen Bee blinked. She had never seen anything like that before. What in two worlds? She had said to take him down, not breathe him in. But the method had been effective, and Helios had gained his first victory. Yet, Queen Bee made a face behind her mask. That couldn't have tasted good. The Simcus burped again. He didn't seem bothered by his sandy meal. On the contrary, he looked quite pleased with himself. He walked over and nuzzled Noble's side with a deep purr. She reached up and patted his head. Good work. Proud of you. Hidden by the fraudulent facade, Bee's smile weakened. That was it. Helios hadn't moved anything but his mouth to get the victory. The queen had expected the battle would take more than 10 seconds. While she was overwhelmed with excitement for Helios's power, she felt a little let down that he hadn't put on more of a show for her kids. No, this is good. It means I can get back to my family sooner. That was my goal after all. Bee reminded herself. Just as she was about to dismiss her golden echo and leave the arena, the flowers started to shift. A grassy path opened before them to take them back toward the other two spectators and their echoes. Soon, the crimson tide would force the pair back into the main arena. Oh, Bee had almost forgotten about the sleeping poppies. I need to get out of here. But Helios bounded forward along the grassy path like a puppy on a mission. He reached the main arena, leaving Queen Bee in the dust. Helios. It was no use. My turn. One of the onlookers smiled faintly. In his brown leather armor, he stepped forward and ran his hand through his neatly trimmed hair. Savage Senki and Darkscale have challenged Queen Bee and Helios. Bee resisted the urge to slap her forehead. She hadn't been fast enough, and now leaving would mean forfeiting. The flowers paused their forward push and reformed the ring. The new combatant smiled broadly and strode forward with his echo. This creature looked strikingly similar to Helios, except she was jet black and larger. Whereas Helios stood above Bee's shoulder, the black cat's shoulder was above her head. Her tail was not prehensile like the Simpus's either. Bee marveled at the magnificent beast. Seriously, what falls into the upper weight category? That monster is huge. A few moments later, Savage Senki and Darkscale took their places opposite of her. The black cat crouched, ready to pounce on her master's command. Faced with a decision, Bee needed to think fast. Leave or fight. The last battle had taken barely 7 seconds. Didn't her family deserve more than that? This creature was clearly a better match than the last one for Helios' skill. It would be a shame to waste this opportunity. Just one more. A smile curled onto her lips. All right, Helios, obliterate her. Savage Senki urged his echo forward at the same moment. Helios and Darkscale raced to the center of the ring with claws drawn. The darker creature may have had the size and power, but the lighter one had the speed and agility. With such a matchup, Noble was not sure which would come out on top. For his part, Savage Senki was focused, the intensity in his soft, dark eyes looking like two hurricanes. Is he augmenting Darkscale with an ability? Noble studied the man for a moment. A drip of sweat trickled from his brow as he balled his fists. He was doing everything he could to win this match, short of being in the ring himself. Bee respected his commitment. Should she be doing more to help her golden companion? For now, she would wait and watch. Between the two humans, Helios sank low while Savage leapt high. So when the prowling panther pounced to catch Helios in her grasp, he had already dodged and was prepared with an attack of his own. His tail reached out and grabbed one of her back paws before she could land, jerking it to one side. By pulling her foot out from under her, Darkscale's trajectory suddenly shifted. The powerful panther roared as she landed on her side with a crash. The ground beneath her dented, sending clods of dirt in every direction as she slid. Had the graceful panther landed on her feet, she could have turned on her heels with the full force of her might. She would have been able to pin Helios to the ground and sink her teeth and claws into his flesh. The clash would have ended in a titanic brawl of fangs and fur. But it wasn't meant to be. For Darkscale was indeed incredibly powerful, but speed was not on her side. As soon as she hit the dirt, Helios was immediately upon her, razor-sharp nails digging deep into her velvety hide. Bee heard the sound of cracking ribs and then saw a spray of blood. Darkscale gave an unearthly wail. Suddenly, Helios had something red in his mouth. Did he just steal her heart? The thought might have sounded romantic, but the sight was sickening. The queen furrowed her brow. No, Helios. Don't eat it. It's bad manners. And also maybe cannibalism. Helios heeded her warning and spat the heart back into the open chest. But the damage, of course, had been done. Darkscale's silky body went still. Savage Senki and Darkscale have been eliminated. Queen Bee and Helios have won. The panther dissipated in a shimmery display. With a final smile, Savage Senki looked at Queen Bee with a tip of his chin. Until next time. Then he, too, was gone. Like that, the second match was over. B was certainly impressed by his back-to-back near-instant victories. Kosi would have been proud too. Good work, Helios. Now, let's get out of. Iwana Baphamus and Spotlight have challenged Queen B and Helios. B screamed internally. You have got to be kidding. Random Girl 23 and mine have been eliminated. Queen B and Helios have won. The fair-haired challenger and her gopher-like echo disappeared from view. There goes another one. The queen had mixed feelings about the turn of events. One battle turned into 5 and 5 had too quickly become 10. Her initial intentions had been good. B only wanted to put on a decent show for her children. But each result was the same. Helios took out his opponent in a matter of seconds without gaining a scratch. Queen B had originally been worried about Helios getting hurt, but now she realized her logic was flawed. It was everyone else who was in danger. Opponent after opponent was ripped, slashed, or torn in a gruesome display of power. None were knocked out by the sleeping poppies. That would have been a more merciful end. Other than giving her echo some preliminary advice, Queen B did not have to do much. Helios seemed to instinctively know how to exploit the weakness of his rival. Was that something woven into the nature of her echo, or was it simply because he was an extension of a battle master like B? That was something the professor would have to study at a later date. For now, Queen B would just watch and help when she could. The queen was not the only one watching. With each of their victories, more attention was gathered from the other participants around her until their battle was the only one occurring in the field of flowers. That was not to say the place was empty. On the contrary, the holding area was full of combatants chomping at the bit to get a chance to go against Helios and his famous master. As much fun as B was having fun learning the capabilities of her new echo, she felt that the circus of carnage had gone on long enough. It was time to return to her family. Even if the next battle gave the Simcus no trouble, she would still leave the second the Dreamscape had announced victory. It was only her vanity keeping her here at this point anyway. So when the poppies shifted to allow the champion to return to the center ring, Queen B held up a single finger and looked at all of the competitors with a fierce gaze. They understood the message. One more. The mood of hopeful combatants shifted as a single challenger pushed his way through the crowd. Above him loomed a black cloud threatening to strike out at anyone who dared to impede his path. Some grumbled, but none dared to question his claim. When the young man reached the closest point to Queen B, the Dreamscape boomed enthusiastically. Illiterate Twin and Hollow Whisper have challenged Queen B and Helios. A hush fell over the others, any hint of dissension now gone. What kind of name is Illiterate Twin? Wait, I have heard of him. Brock and Blaze had mentioned the Duelist in passing because he had Twin in his name and had a rather unique echo. The queen tried to remember what the boys had said as she moved her eyes toward the cloud over Illiterate Twin's head. She had assumed at first that the cloud was some manifestation of the man's aspect, but now she realized the cloud was the echo. Or at the very least, the echo was in the cloud. Inside the inky mist, arms swayed and coiled in every direction. It's a flying octopus. This was an abomination from the Stormsia. The creature could fight on land, in the ocean, or even fly in the air. Its versatility was unparalleled. What had the young fighter done to get such a powerful echo? Was it a gift, or was the young man a prodigy fighter? Queen B could not ask. Even if she could, she would not insult the other challenger with a question like that. Anyway, there were more important things to worry about. Helios growled softly at the creature coming toward them. He could feel something strange happening in the overhead cloud as the hair of his mane stood on end. It was the first time B had seen her echo remotely nervous. That is not to say the Simcus was scared. He was simply cautious. As the flowers parted to make a guiding path for the challenger, a smile found its way onto Queen B's lips. This should be interesting. The Illiterate Twin and Hollow Whisper were sealed in with Queen B and Helios a moment later. There was no backing out now. Not that Queen B wanted to. I wonder if the poppies affect him if he doesn't touch them. B glanced at the red flowers. If the octopus could stray out of bounds without being eliminated, that would be an extra challenge for her golden-haired companion. Don't let him lure you to the edge. This is the Dreamscape, and I don't think you will be immune to those poppies if you touch them, no matter how strong you are. Helios grunted and lowered himself into a crouching position. No cephalopod was going to get the best of him today, flying or not. By now, Bee had realized that her instinctual nudges were more than enough to guide the Simcus, but she felt better speaking to him mentally. The golden creature was willful and had too much of a personality in her mind for her to simply treat him like a tool. So she advised him more than she dictated his actions. It just felt right. And if the last 10 battles were any indication, it was a winning formula. 11 has a nice ring to it. Let's go for the sweep. Helios pushed his body to the ground and made himself small. He pressed his paws over his eyes, retracting his claws to avoid scratching his precious nose. The Simcus whimpered. To the outside, he seemed scared of the storm cloud of motion overhead. Illiterate Twin tilted his head to one side. Had the Echo finally given up his reign of terror? The only person who wasn't fooled by the act was Queen Bee. She was connected to him, after all, and she could feel the confidence that the creature possessed. The inky cloud around the octopus dissipated as the octopus froze in place. He seemed confused by the other Echo's behavior. He drew near, trying to discern what exactly was happening. The space between the two creatures lessened until Hollow Whisper took one fleshy tentacle from its swirling mass of limbs and reached toward the golden ball of fur. For a moment, it looked like the flying sea creature would do to Helios what the Simcus had done to all of those prior. The tentacle wrapped around Helios's middle and prepared to toss him into the poppies. But before he could complete the action, the mighty demon sprung to life. The golden fiend's long teeth ripped into the tentacle, severing it from the rest of its body. One arm down, countless to go. Queen Bee kept the thought to herself. With the element of surprise gone, Helios did not need any of her less than positive thoughts to affect him. Things were heating up. Enraged by the loss of his limb, Hollow Whisper shot 6 more arms at his opponent, ready to grab all 4 legs and Helios' head and tail and pull them apart in 6 different directions. The Simcus welcomed the assault. He pushed off the first arm and caught the second one with his prehensile tail. The next 2 limbs served as stepping stones, while the final limbs scrambled to keep up with their slippery foe. Helios looked more like a snake than a mammal as he clawed his way into the air. Gashes appeared in the flying monster's skin as Helios found his way toward the gelatinous head. Arms coiled around the Simcus trying to slow the creature's upward climb. One tentacle twisted around Helios's front paw, but he bent down and bit through the limb before it could take hold. A furious battle of wills ensued, with neither creature willing to give a centimeter of ground without making the other pay the price. As more and more limbs unwrapped from the cephalopod, Helios's progress slowed. He could only push back against so many rope-like arms. Finally, his movement toward the head ceased altogether. But Helios was not discouraged. It only made him more determined. As soon as the golden demon was fully bound, Hollow Whisper began to bring the beautiful beast towards his mouth. The arms uncoiled completely to reveal a gaping maw at the base of the inky head. Watch out. Don't let him eat you. While perhaps being eaten in his final match after eating someone in his first battle had some poetic symmetry, Helios had no intention of being sentimental. So he did the only thing that he could. The Simcus changed tactics. As Helios drew close to the bulbous head of the octopus, he drew in a deep breath. For a moment, he thought he might try to suck Hollow Whisper into his mouth instead, but the creature was far too large for that feat to ever be feasible. The inky cloud of a creature resisted the pull easily, tightening his grip as his victory drew near. His beakish mouth opened and closed rhythmically, ready to chomp on the creature who had unceremoniously removed so many of his limbs. But the next time the octopus opened his beak, Helios was ready. The Simcus let loose an unearthly howl. It was full of power, like it had some tangible force inside of the air breathed out. The air soared into the octopus's beak, causing its 2 beady eyes to open wide. The gelatinous head inflated under the pressure, looking ready to burst. Shuddering, Hollow Whispered snapped his beak shut and started flying upwards. He was done playing games. No, Queen Bee had a good idea of what was going to happen next. Like Hollow Whisper, she could fly, and the easiest thing to do to an opponent who could not fly was to drop them from a significant height. Let gravity do the work and conserve energy. As expected, Hollow Whisper rose over the battlefield, and when it began to truly resemble a black cloud in the sky, the octopus started to release its prey. But Helios was not ready to leave. The Simcus dug his claws deep into the soft flesh of the tentacled beast. When Hollow Whisper flailed to dislodge his target, huge gashes were the disastrous result. Helios looked like a jungle cat leaping from branch to branch through a rainforest of arms. His speed, agility, and claws were causing the cephalopod no end of misery. Hollow Whisper had a tactical advantage, especially with so many arms, but his inability to counter the jungle cat's tenacity and cunning kept the impressive octopus from achieving a swift victory. With the battle of wills now in the air, the match was Hollow Whisper's to lose. Yet the clash of the powerful echoes raged on for several minutes in a stalemate. Every time the monster opened his beak, Helios tried to push more powerful air into the creature's head. The deformation of Hollow Whisper's head became more pronounced, causing the flying echo to drift. Then, without warning, both echoes started to sink toward the ground. The queen realized why. Helios, he has taken you out of bounds. You cannot touch the ground. Queen Bee looked at the poppies. Their petals fluttered in an unseen wind, ready to accept the offering from above. Helios heeded her words, fighting even harder against the might of his captor. One of the tentacles tried to wrap around the Simcus's neck to strangle him, but he opened his mouth and dug his fangs deep into the undulating arm. The teeth hit a nerve and Hollow Whisper convulsed. The spasm brought Helios close enough to finally dig his claws into the head of the octopus. A tear sliced across the creature's skin, inky blood dripping down like acidic rain. The controlled descent suddenly turned into an uncontrolled fall. Like a hot air balloon, the octopus's head began to deflate with the release of pressure. In a moment, both echoes would be sleeping in the poppies without hope for revival. Would that be counted as a draw? Queen Bee considered using her ability to fly Helios from harm, but that would be cheating. She could augment her echo, but not directly interfere. Those were the rules. Before she could call out a command to try and help, both creatures hit the field of poppies and were engulfed in the mist of pollen. That's it then, Queen Bee waited for the dust to clear. But then her eyes opened wide. She had to float out of the way quickly as a large golden creature took an abnormally long jump back into the ring. Helios stood tall, scratches covering his body like badges of honor. What? How? Bee looked back at Hollow Whisper. There were 2 large indents in his deflating skull. Somehow Helios had managed to climb on top of the octopus at the last moment and use his head to springboard to safety. He had pulled victory from the tentacles of defeat. As the octopus slowly dissolved into sparks, Illiterate Twin hummed softly. It seems we have some real competition for once. Impressive. Then, he, too, began to disappear. Illiterate Twin and Hollow Whisper have been eliminated. Queen Bee and Helios have won. Before the announcement was even complete, the queen and her golden boy blipped out of existence. A new reign was born. Queen Bee hastily left the Dreamscape just before the announcement was complete. In the space between her exit and her entrance into the waking world, she considered a few things among the stars of the void. Her time in the Dreamscape had been enlightening at the very least. Helios had not only met her expectations but far exceeded them as a fighter and as a companion in battle. She learned that their connection ran deep. Sometimes Helios reacted to her thoughts before they were even fully formed. Helios's powerful breath was the biggest surprise. Kosi had never demonstrated that ability. Or had he? Noble remembered Kosi's bounding leaps when he scaled the city wall. He had breathed out each time as he sailed through the air. At the time, Noble had assumed that the rhythmic breathing was merely to push more power into the Simcus's muscles as he pounced. But now she realized he might be putting extra force into his impossible leaps through more magical means. Even Amira had seemed hesitant to go up against Kosi's roar. Now Noble wished she had watched her friend and protector's fighting style more closely back when they first met. But that time had passed. So she would count the blessings she did have instead of dwelling on what might have been. Helios appeared in the void beside her and she smiled at him. You did well. Better than well, actually. I am proud of you. The Simkus, of course, didn't answer. But he lowered his head before returning to her soul sea. Opening her eyes, Noble enthusiastically threw open the POD's door. Perhaps a little too enthusiastically. Still unused to her increased strength, Noble's gauntlets made indents in the alloy POD's handle. If she had pushed any harder, the hinges and wall might have suffered damage as well. Oops. Wincing, the duelist gently lowered the lid to hide her blunder and dismissed her fraudulent facade. The handle was still functional at least. She would worry about it later. For now, her main concern was located in the other room. Her family. Even though Helios had been triumphant, Noble couldn't help but feel guilty at having stayed too long in the Dreamscape. She wouldn't make them wait any longer. Still in her Queen Bee armor, Noble returned to her living room. Even with all the protection, she felt very exposed. Peeking over the couch and from the recliner, 4 pairs of eyes were staring intently at her as soon as she entered the room. I'm back, the mother said sheepishly, unsure of exactly the welcome she would receive. Her own emotions were too overwhelming for her to get an accurate reading of the room. That was until Fort lifted the rest of his face over the back of the couch to reveal his Cheshire grin. Did you enjoy your one round in the Dreamscape? He asked innocently. Blasted man, why do you always have to be right? Hadn't he predicted she wouldn't stay longer than planned? I never said how long a single round was. She brushed her hair behind her shoulders defiantly. I don't know that anyone has ever defined one round as 11 matches, Blaze pointed out, mimicking his father's innocent gaze. Mother, I think you may have a problem with counting. I can help with that. Brock gave his mother a thumbs up. Or I can help you find a good tutor, Rain chimed in, her serious face offset by the laughter in her eyes. All right. You all have had your fun. Noble placed her hands on her hips before dropping them to her side. I admit that may have a bit of a problem when it comes to the Dreamscape. I lost track of time. I am sorry I was gone so long. Long. Rain raised one eyebrow. You've barely been gone 20 minutes. Really? Noble glanced at the closest clock. It was time for the kids to head to their rooms, but only barely. The first 10 battles had all taken an average of a minute or less, with a few being only seconds long. And the last one felt like an eternity, but really even it was only around 10 minutes of intense fighting. Huh, interesting. Noble shrugged. Now that we have established that I am terrible with time, what did you think? That was incredible. Blaze held up a datapad. I took notes of each battle for you to look over later. Thank you, son. Noble blew her youngest boy a kiss. That was quite a show. I can't believe he ate a competitor. Rain was somewhere between amused and still shocked. And stole a lady's heart, Noble added with the tip of her mouth slanting upwards. That's because Leo is the best. He has the strength and the swagger. Brock pumped his fist in the air. Noble furrowed her brow. Leo. Helios Leo. It's called a nickname, Mom. Brock sounded exasperated at having to explain himself. I see. The professor chuckled lightly. Whatever you call him, he and his handler did amazing this evening. Perhaps another prize is in order. Fort winked, making Noble blush. Dad, we can hear you, you know. Rain covered her face with her hand. Good. Fort's smile only grew bigger. I appreciate the sentiment, but I didn't do much. Noble folded her hands behind her back. For the most part, she had felt like a front-row spectator more than a participant. She's right, Dad. Blaze set down the datapad and clasped his hands. If anyone should get a prize, it should be Brock and I, since it was our idea. So, Mom, can we possibly have that ride on Leo's back now? His mother's eyes swirled slightly as she raised a gauntlet in protest. Oh no. You all promised to head to bed, remember? Tests are tomorrow. Maybe this weekend we can do a bit more. After my interview with Frey, there will be no reason to hide him anymore. Noble caught her husband's surprised expression. Are you sure you want to do that? He stood up as he examined her face. I'm sure. At this point, it is better to come out with my own statement than to rely on misinformation from others. Noble knew from experience that the person who broke the story could control the narrative. And the professor wanted that control for herself. Fort wrapped his arms around his wife and kissed her forehead lightly. Whatever you need from me, I will do. If you want me to contact the government's public relations person, I can. We can talk about that tomorrow. Noble set aside the thought for the moment. Right now I think certain people need to get ready for bed unless they want a real duel without practice weapons. The boys exchanged glances. Last one to bed has to battle Mom with their eyes closed. Brock cackled as he raced off. Blaze was hot on his tail. Not fair. You got a head start. Watching her brother's mad dash, Rain clicked her tongue. Boys, can't live with them, can't ship them off to boarding school. Don't pretend you don't enjoy their antics. They keep life exciting. Noble winced as she heard a crash down the hall. Rain nodded seriously. I suppose, but sometimes I could do with a little less excitement. Trust me, I understand more than you know, Noble chuckled softly. And I can say with confidence that I will take those raucous boys and you over anything else. Rain's eyes softened as she looked at her mother. I love you, Mom. It's good to have you back. The two ladies hugged and Noble felt her eyes fill with tears. It is good to be back, Rainy. I love you too. They stayed like that for a moment, both feeling like wounds had been healed. Finally, Rain let go and smiled. Good night, Mom. Good night, Dad. Fort watched his daughter leave. When did she get so grown up? I swear she was just a little girl last week. His eyes caught Noble's and he stopped his reminiscing. Fort cleared his throat. Now that I have you alone. Another crash down the hall pulled the parents' attention. Fort balled his fists. Sensing his mood, Noble kissed his mouth quickly and winked. I'll get them settled and I'll meet you in a moment. A real moment, not a dreamscape one. Fort narrowed his gaze and smiled. Fine, but one moment, and then I'm coming after you. The look in his eyes made Noble's heart skip a beat. I'll be quick. She floated down the hall quickly to give some carefully worded promises to the boys if they didn't calm down and sleep. But when she returned to the living room, Fort was gone. Fort, Noble called out as she simultaneously sent out her extra sight to search the area. Her fingers, which had been ready to summon a weapon, relaxed. Fort was in their bathroom. With a small smile, Noble floated into their bedroom. Brushing your teeth. I hear you like a man with fresh breath, he answered without coming into view. Whoever told you that was very wise. Noble shut the door to the room. What else did they tell you? There was a pause. That you look stunning in blue. Noble was caught off guard by the answer until she looked down at her armor. Is that a subtle hint to change? Your words, not mine. Fort teased. I'll be out in a second. Such a cutie, Noble smiled as she headed into the closet. Looking through her clothes, she selected a silky deep blue dress and changed out of her armor. She ran her fingers through her long hair and tried to make herself look presentable. Oh, Noble's eyes opened wide as she noticed the changes in her bedroom from only a moment before. The lights had been lowered and the room was oddly silent. But the most striking change was the presence of her husband. He was dressed in the same luxurious suit that he had worn to the Valor Ball. His blonde hair was combed neatly to one side as he leaned against the bathroom's door frame. Hello, beautiful. Calm and casual, Fort looked dapper, better than any movie star. Noble caught herself before her mind wandered too far. You look handsome, she said when she realized that she had been staring out at him without responding. I didn't expect to see you like this. You look good. Why are you stuttering? He's your husband, you fool. Coughing, Noble blushed and smoothed her dress. I seem to be severely underdressed for this occasion. You look perfect. And as for the attire. Fort strode forward confidently, looking her up and down approvingly. That is an issue we can discuss in greater detail later. As he came near, Noble's breath hitched. The colors of her eyes went wild. Fort smirked, clearly pleased with her reaction. He came close and leaned forward. Noble closed her eyes. She could almost feel his lips brush against hers, but then he pulled away. Instead, he lifted her right hand and kissed the tips of her fingers. Noble wrinkled her nose. Such a gentleman. Are you trying to torture me? Good things come to those who wait. Fort kissed her hand a second time. Case in point, you are back. He winked. A small knot of guilt formed in Noble's stomach. Fort, I'm sorry. But the gentleman held up his hand to forestall her apology. None of that. Tonight there is no past or future. Just now. And right now, I want to dance. Dance. The lovely woman pursed her lips. Here. Nodding, the director bowed formally. Excuse me, miss, may I have this dance? There's no music. Noble's blush deepened as she held out her hand for him to take. Oh. Fort raised one eyebrow knowingly at her like she did so often to him. He spun her around with the hand he was holding and pulled her close. A moment later soft music permeated the air. He began to sway slowly with the woman in his arms. You were saying? Fort asked triumphantly. But Noble was distracted by the tune. This song. Our song, he corrected her, pulling her closer. I knew the moment I held you in my arms and this song started playing that you were the one. Noble remembered the moment well. Fort had taken her to what he thought was going to be a nice, quiet restaurant not knowing it had come under new management. He was too embarrassed to admit that he didn't know there would be dancing, so he had awkwardly invited her to the dance floor. They had swayed to this song, just like they were doing now. It had been a magical evening. There was only one problem with Fort's assertion. Noble's mouth opened slightly. What do you mean you knew then that I was the one? That was our first date. What can I say? I have good taste. Fort pulled her closer. Melting into his arms, Noble rested her head against his shoulder. His smell was intoxicating. This moment was worth all the weeks of struggle to get home. This man holding her was worth every bit of trouble. A happy sigh escaped her lips. They danced in companionable silence for a long while. The moment was too perfect to waste with words. Finally, the song ended, and the fragile trance holding them both was broken. You didn't have to get all dressed up for me, you know. Noble turned her head to whisper in her husband's ear. But I'm very glad you did. Noble felt her husband's emotions spike, and it filled her with no small amount of pleasure. It was nice to know she could affect him as much as he affected her. I was going to spread rose petals on the ground, but I couldn't find a florist who would deliver them in time. Fort glanced at the floor, wishing he had tried a little harder. Noble clicked her tongue. I like it better this way. She smiled up at him, and he pressed his forehead against hers. Always so quick to forgive. One of the many things I love about you. Fort's eyes were brimming with delight. I love you too. Noble rubbed her nose against her husband's. He suddenly pulled away. There is only one thing I don't love about you right now. Lifting up her hand, Fort motioned to the missing ring on her finger. I can explain. Noble started, but the man shushed her softly. An unmarried woman in here with me. So shameful, he teased. I shall have to remedy this immediately. Wah! Noble felt her cheeks burning as Fort got down on one knee and pulled a box from his pocket. Miss Noble, love of my life and bee of my heart, will you marry me? The professor stared wide-eyed at her wedding ring in Fort's hand. How did you get that? A red-headed little birdie gave it to your mother when she stopped by the bakery this morning. Fort frowned. Now you didn't answer my question. Does that mean you say no? Yes, I mean no. Wait, no, it isn't a no. It's a yes. Of course, I'll marry you. 100 times over. I would never marry anyone else, Noble tried to make herself clear. She held out her left hand and Fort slipped the ring on her finger. There, he said with a firm nod. Much better. Noble looked at the golden band and precious stones. She had done everything she could to make sure it got back to the waking world safely. And now it was back where it belonged. And returned by the most handsome man in 2 worlds, no less. Wrapping her arms around her husband's neck, Noble kissed him fervently. Remember how you said you wanted me to want you? Fort nodded slowly. I do. Noble ran her hand down Fort's suit lapel as she glanced at her ring. Then she looked up at him from below her eyelashes. Mission accomplished. The director swept his wife up into his arms. I was hoping you would say that. Noble opened her eyes and breathed in the morning air. It was turning cooler outside and she could sense the subtle change that summer had given control over, and they had left the heat behind. But between the heavy blanket and the warm body against her back, Noble felt none of the chill that the morning had to offer. Instead, Fort's rhythmic breathing behind her captivated her entire attention. She enjoyed the sound of his light snoring. Glad to see he slept well. After debating about not going to work yet again, Noble sighed and lightened the covers. It was a trick she had discovered a few nights ago with her new ability. She could make the blanket on her side heavy enough to hold her in place without bringing the bed to the ground. In the morning, she would release the blanket to its normal weight and reclaim the bit of essence she had been using. Feeling the change in the covers, Fort instinctively tightened his grip around the woman in his arms. "I'm awake. You can let me go," she assured him softly. "And what if I don't want to?" The man answered groggily. He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. Noble rolled her eyes playfully. "I have to go into the academy today. I already put off going yesterday." It had been a week since the professor's return to the waking world and Noble had barely left the house. There were many reasons for this hermit-like behavior, but the strongest influence was currently trying to tickle her into submission. Unfortunately, at some point, the honeymoon would have to end in real-life resume. That day was today, yet Fort was unwilling to let her go. "You know I'm not ticklish," Noble reminded her husband. "And you can't actually keep me here. I could break your arms without breaking a sweat. I'm all right with that as long as you'll stay and be my nurse," Fort grinned. "You're incorrigible." Noble laughed. "And I'm all yours." He kissed the back of her head. With a sigh, the director released his captive and preserved the integrity of his arms. There would be no broken bones today. Slipping out from under the covers, Noble blew her husband a kiss before leaving to get ready. She knew if she took too long, Fort would come looking for her and delay her longer. Thankfully, as an ascended, Noble decided she no longer needed to wear makeup. The professor already looked younger than when she entered the nightmare, and she also received a beautification by becoming a master. So her morning routine was blessedly short. Flitting out of the bedroom to make breakfast, Noble hummed a pleasant tune. "Oh hello, Rainy." Noble squeezed her daughter's shoulder gently as she passed the kitchen table. "You're in a good mood," the dark-haired teen noted her mother's musicality and the goofy grin on her face. Noble shrugged. "And why shouldn't I be? You are here, and I'm about to get breakfast ready." Using her ability, Noble pulled the appropriate ingredients to start making Seb's favorite food. On a day as good as today, he deserved to be remembered. Extending her extra sight, Noble sensed the boys were awake and getting ready. They would be out soon before heading on to track practice. But for now, things were quiet. While breakfast cooked on the stove, Noble sat down beside her daughter. "Will you be getting midterm grades today?" she asked casually. Noble would be proud of her daughter no matter her grades, but the professor wanted to know just how big of an impact her sudden appearance in the waking world had made on those scores. Hopefully, she wouldn't suffer another setback at Noble's expense. "They should come out in the next day or two." Rain furrowed her brow as she looked down at her communicator. "You don't have to worry, you know." Noble began. "If I need to, I will go to the school and demand you get an opportunity to retake the exams due to extenuating circumstances." "What? No. It should be fine. I was making a face at some of the comments your QueenBee article has." "Look." Rain slid the communicator toward Noble. "QueenBee reveals herself. She's even more impressive in real life." Noble read the inflated byline with a sigh. She didn't feel impressive, but arguing with a news article would have made her look even more insane in front of her daughter. One of the few times Noble had left the house in the past week was to meet with Frey. Fort had insisted on going with her, and the couple had met with the reporter a few nights ago. The restaurant where they met was crowded, but the private room that the reporter reserved gave them all the space that they needed to conduct the interview in peace. Frey's questions were many, and some of them Noble refused to answer, but in the end, the three people found a middle ground where the reporter, duelist, and government agent were all comfortable. "A pleasure doing business with you as always," Frey told the duelist as he picked up the check. "We are counting on you to do her justice." If there is anything unbefitting. Fort narrowed his gaze. Signing the bill, Frey chuckled lightly. I am sure you will level the full brunt of the government against me. We understand each other, Director Fort. You do not need to worry. I will do the magnificent Queen of the Dreamscape justice. And he had. The article was masterfully written to make the real-life incarnation of Queen Bee look even more impressive than her duelist persona. At the kitchen table now, Noble scanned through the words of the article and clicked her tongue. Frey is usually more honest than this. I'm not a gift to humanity. Propaganda at its finest. Still, the words were flattering, and they made her happy. That was, until she got to the comments. There were thousands of them. Some were congratulations and praise. Others were comments comparing her to other prominent duelists. Most remarks were benign with a few trolls mixed in, but then Noble grew beet red. What in two worlds? One commenter in particular had a lot to say. People online had no shame at all, it seemed. Placing her head in her hand, Noble blew out her cheeks. She handed Rain back the communicator. Don't let your brothers see any of that. Or your father. I'll deal with it on my way to work. Deal with what? Fort came out of the bedroom sharply dressed. Mom has a crazed fan, Rain said, earning a look of censor from her mother. The teen shrugged. She had not shown him anything. Just one. Fort teased. Then his face tensed. Who? Just a commenter on Frey's Queen Bee article. It's nothing to worry about. Noble waved her hand. I was telling Rainy that I'll contact Frey on the way to work and. Fort took the communicator from his daughter before she could tuck it away. He glanced at the screen, and his face darkened. You won't take care of it. I will. When you say, take care of it, what exactly do you mean? Noble bit her lip. Fort's face relaxed as he inhaled deeply. That smells wonderful. I guess I know what we are having for breakfast. He wandered over to the stove and took over the stirring from the invisible chef. Fort. Noble moved away from the table with a look of genuine concern. Yes, Bee? He asked innocently. The professor leveled her gaze at her husband. What are you going to do? Fort glanced past her toward his daughter, who was a little too eagerly listening to the exchange. He sighed. I won't do anything illegal or murder. Why? At least not until I know more. More. The man's insane. What more is there to know? Noble chewed the inside of her cheek. Plenty, was all that Fort would respond. Was he being vague on purpose to keep her from knowing or because he didn't want their daughter to overhear? Reluctantly, Noble let the topic go. We can talk more later. Just don't do anything crazy. Says the woman who goes and defends against Gates in her spare time. Fort lifted one eyebrow at her. The professor winced. Do as I say, not as I do. The blonde man turned and looked her seriously in the eye. His sudden nearness took Noble's breath away. His next words were little more than a whisper. I will do what I can to protect you. Never doubt that. That is why you are my hero. Noble pressed her lips gently against her husband's. She felt the sudden fierceness of his longing. A longing she shared. It was all too tempting too. I don't know whether I should say this is sweet or gross, so I'm just going to ask if breakfast is almost ready or if I should go gather my things. Rain hid a smirk. Even if thinking about it too much made her feel a little queasy, she liked seeing that her parents were still in love. There was a feeling of security in seeing them so happy in each other's presence. You can get your things. Breakfast is still a couple of minutes away. Fort nodded to his daughter as if nothing had happened, but winked behind her back. When she was out of earshot, Noble tapped her cheek. The food is ready now, isn't it? The director nodded. It is, but if I said that I wouldn't have been able to do this. Fort ran his fingers along Noble's chin and caught them in her hair. Kissing her deeply, he was about to try something more when two rowdy boys came tumbling out of the hallway. The director grunted at the intrusion. That's what you get for trying to be sneaky. Noble touched the man's nose and escaped his embrace. Morning, boys. Mom, I can't find my. It's by the front door, Brock, Noble answered, pointing. Mom, have you seen my? Noble pulled his datapad from the counter and held it out to her youngest child. I thought you might need this before you left. I think it fell out of your backpack. Thanks. Both boys happily finished their respective tasks before grabbing bowls. Soon the family was having breakfast all together. It was strange and wonderful how quickly they had fallen into a new routine. The boys' earlier hour for track practice coincided with Rain's more strenuous school schedule. And today, that would allow both Fort and Noble to get to work early. With so many plans, the conversation was light but pleasant. Most of it centered around the NQSC's upcoming track meet. Brock was very hopeful that he might win. "As long as you do your best, that's enough for me," Noble asserted with a bright smile. "You'll be there though, right?" Brock asked around his spoonful of food. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," the professor crossed her heart. "I have to see for myself what amazing athletes I raised." "Don't get your hopes too high," Blaze winced. "First or last, I'll still be proud." His mother patted his hand lightly. "Boys, the PTV is here to take you to school." Fort looked down at his communicator to see the notification. Popping up quickly, the twins grabbed their backpacks and track gear. A moment later, they slipped on their running shoes and hurried out of the door. After finishing her bowl, Rain placed her dishes in the sink. "I should be on my way too. Do you want to walk together, Mom? Or do you have other plans?" Her eyes slid to Fort in silent accusation. The man held up his hands innocently. You want to walk with me?" Noble's mouth hung slightly open. "I do," Rain answered simply. It would be easy to assume that Rain's change of heart had come from Noble's sudden increase in status. After all, the professor had gone from being a dowdy mother to a well-known master and Dreamscape champion. These days, who wouldn't want to be seen with her? But Noble had the advantage of feeling the girl's emotions. Rain had no ulterior motive or grand design. She simply longed for the companionship of her mother on the way to school. The offer was irresistible. "I would be honored. Just give me a second." Noble turned to look at the mess in the kitchen. Fort laughed at her slight pout. "I've got this. I said I would protect you, and right now that means protecting you from soapy dishwater hands. Now, shoo." Giving her husband a kiss for his trouble, Noble was ready and out the door nearly faster than Rain could keep up. Their walk to the station was pleasant and comfortable despite the cooler weather. The conversation was easy, much easier than Noble had felt it was ever before. While there was still a parent-child relationship between them, Noble at least felt that someday when the time to be the authority over her daughter's life was through, they might be able to form a new kind of relationship on a more equal footing. The people on the train stared as they boarded, but quickly looked away. Noble felt for her wrists and made sure the golden bracelets like the ones Amira wore were on her wrists. No one would immediately think she was a master just by being near her. The full extent of her power was hidden. Having her hair pulled back and letting her eyes look more green than blue also kept anyone who had seen the news article from making any connections. As a result, it was an uneventful ride. The ladies chatted idly, ignoring the troubles of the world around them. It was nice to feel utterly normal for a change. Often it was the little things like seeing a teen smile genuinely at a joke that made life worth living. Rain's stop came all too soon. Noble hugged the girl. "Have a wonderful day. If you stop by the bakery and see Sarai, tell her I said hi." "I will. Love you." Rain straightened her satchel and headed for the doors. "Love you too." Noble watched her baby girl head out into the station. Sometimes the most uneventful events were the most enjoyable. If only the rest of the day would have been so peaceful. Getting the offensive comments deleted and getting the user removed from commenting took no time at all. Fort had already been in contact with Frey, and the reporter assured her that it would not happen again. He seemed even more upset by the development than she did. Frey better not blame himself for someone else's stupidity. Pushing aside the other thoughts, Noble got mentally prepared for the day. There was a lot to do. However, Noble's entry to the academy gates was slowed by a large crowd of people. They were all filled with anticipation. At first Noble wondered if a famous legacy was gracing the academy with their presence. Perhaps the young scion of a clan was due to arrive at any moment. But then one of the loiterers turned her face and locked eyes with Noble. Her face lit up. "Professor Noble," she called out. Noble barely had time to register that the woman was a former student when the rest of the people suddenly rushed toward her in an avalanche. Only none of them were calling her professor. Queen Bee, what's it like to have fallen through a gate? Queen Bee, what are your Dreamscape plans now that you have become a master? Queen Bee, do you have any comment on the ongoing struggle in Antarctica? On and on the questions pelted her. After a week of relative quiet, the overwhelming noise, attention, and emotions nearly sent Noble into a panic. But as a warrior both inside and out of the dreamscape, the woman remained calm. She floated through the crowd, ignoring the questions and comments of those around her. Only one of the crowd dared to get close enough to touch her. But before Noble could react, an awakened guard at the gate grabbed him and pulled his hands behind his back. The man wearing sunglasses and a dark wig struggled against the restraint. I just want an autograph and a moment of the Queen's time. Get off of me. The rest of the guards quickly formed a shield around the professor until she had made it into the academy's walls. Then they sealed the entrance while the crowd continued to try to get her attention. When she was out of view, Noble heaved a sigh of relief. Next time I will fly over the wall from the side, she promised herself. The thought had crossed her mind when the crowd descended on her, but the professor did not want to show them any sign of weakness. She was confused and a little overwhelmed, but not afraid of them. Noble hurried across the academy grounds, her mind deep in thought. That was a lot of reporters and fans. How had they known she would come in today after a week of being gone? Or had they been waiting at the doors of the academy all week? That would explain the extra guards at the entrance. Then why didn't any of them try to come to the house? Or contact me on my communicator? Suddenly the quiet week became oddly suspicious. In the moment, Noble had been quite happy that the world had left them alone, but now her senses told her that it had been more than luck. Pieces started to fall into place in her mind. Pulling out her communicator, Noble called her husband. From the background noise, he was not yet at work. Hello, my love. Miss me already? Yes, but that is not why I called. Noble suppressed her urge to grin. She needed answers. Those maintenance men working on the street all week. They weren't maintenance men, were they? She heard Fort cough. He hesitated. Why do you ask? Why are you avoiding the question? The professor persisted. I didn't want to worry you or the neighbors. They have been keeping watch over the house to make sure that no one tried to harass Queen Bee. The man's tone was unapologetic. In my communicator. Noble pressed. Inhaling deeply, Fort answered in a measured tone. All calls have been routed through Teddy except for those already in your contact list. Same for messages. Before you ask, she volunteered. She enjoys telling people no. I see. Noble processed the information silently for a moment. I can remove it all now. I just wanted you to have the rest you deserved, Fort explained. No, the professor answered quickly. I saw the hornet's nest waiting for me outside of the academy. Now that they know I won't interact with them at my place of work, they may try even harder to reach me in other ways. I don't want the kids to be affected. In fact, I already have their school staff on alert. I might have also called in a few favors. Fort's voice trailed off. The less I know, the better, Noble decided. Thank you for watching out for us. I love you. There was the temptation to be angry that Fort had coddled her. But the results spoke for themselves. She was rested and ready to face the world again. He hadn't been able to save her from the ordeal in the nightmare, but he had done everything to make her transition from the trauma smooth and peaceful. I love you too, Bee. Now please be careful today. Those comments. I believe that might be more than idle words. Fort must have arrived at the gate for work because Noble could hear Praised's usual strange banter. A wolf in sheep's clothing is just a wolf in need of a haircut. Did you just get called a wolf? The professor teased. Possibly. Fort tried not to give the gatekeeper's words too much thought. Anyway, remember what I said. I've got to go. I'll see you this evening. Noble put away her communicator and quickened her pace. She could feel people's eyes on her and heard the occasional whisper as she passed. But since most of the people on the campus were teenage sleepers, they thought twice about approaching a master and kept a safe distance. Having been gone for months in the dream realm and then helping with the evacuation effort part-time before that, Noble didn't recognize almost any of the faces of the students she passed. Normally by now, she would know most of them by sight and many by name. The lack of connection made her a little sad. It's fine. That just makes today that much more important. I have to make a difference with the little time that is left. The solstice is barely 6 weeks away. Noble tried to think of the positive. With all the experience she had gained from her recent adventures, she would be able to add a whole new level of applications to memory use for her students. And it wasn't like she had wanted to be away from the academy. Noble loved her job and knew after years of helping sleepers that her training made a difference. Yet seeing so many fresh faces and not knowing any of them made Noble melancholy. Most of her knew that the absence was unavoidable, but a small part of her felt like she had failed them by not being around. She cared about these people's future success. Something stirred inside Noble as she felt compassion for the sleepers. But before she could register exactly what was happening, a deep voice called out her name. Master Noble. Turning, Noble smiled. Finally, a familiar face. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.